Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. Welcome to Late Night here on Talk, the home of common sense. It's me, Phil Dave, with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. And my goodness me, what a packed show we have got for you. There's so much to get through. I tell you what, it might be summer recess, but boy, oh boy, are there some stories around. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has said that Labour is failing to tackle the small boats crisis, accusing the government of simply moving asylum seekers out of hotels and into other accommodation. Now, Badenoch says that a Conservative government would leave the European Convention on Human Rights, prevent asylum claims from people who arrive illegally, and deport them quickly. Also, she wants to toughen the rules on permanent settlement and citizenship, saying that the time people would have to wait would be doubled. They've forgotten they were in power for 14 years. Anyway, it comes as new figures show, by the way, that more than 140,000 migrants were granted permanent settlement or British citizenship in just 3 months, equivalent to more than one every minute. That means, if you imagine it, during the course of this show, 180 would be granted some sort of settlement. That is almost 200,000 people were granted indefinite leave to remain in the year to June, the highest figure in 16 years. Meanwhile, Birmingham City Council is seeking a High Court injunction to remove unauthorised British flags from the city's streets. The council says that the move is about public safety and community cohesion after staff involved in removing flags reported harassment. Opponents accuse the council of targeting patriotic displays. In Middlesbrough, more than 200 extra police officers have been drafted into the area amid fears of escalating gang violence. It follows Saturday's fatal A66 crash in which 2 police officers and 5 young men died. Several further incidents are now being investigated, including a fatal house fire, a house ramming and a stabbing. And there's been outrage after several cars were reportedly torched at a memorial gathering for one of the crash victims. Meanwhile, former Educational Secretary Michael Gove has accused Cambridge University of teaching toxic nonsense, attacking its approach to teacher training and education. And the Metropolitan Police says that Bob Villain frontman Pascal Robinson Foster will face no further action over death to the IDF chants from a pro-Iran rally in London. It is a decision that, of course, has been widely criticised by the Jewish community and many others as well, frankly. On top of all of that, the BBC's financial future is back under scrutiny because today, presenter Amal Rajan says that the corporation is, quote-unquote, screwed without a replacement for the licence fee, as the BBC plans major cuts and potentially thousands of job losses. All of those stories and much more between now and 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. And I would very much like for you to have your say on any of the topics featured tonight. Make sure you get in touch because never forget, here at Talk, your opinion matters. You can call 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK plus your message to 87222. Do make sure, though, you start your message with the word TALK. And, of course, you can also WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. Loads of ways to get in touch. Do make sure you have your say. Let us spend what is left of Friday evening together. Right, speaking of spending Friday evening together, I'm very pleased to say that joining me in the studio is Conservative commentator Anna Ridgway. Anna, a very good evening to you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, do you know, there is, as I've mentioned, there's so much to get through this evening. So, I mean, I'm almost tempted to say I don't know where to start. But I think the obvious place to start is actually the very first story that I mentioned, and that was about Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch saying that Labour's failing to solve the small boats crisis and accusing the government of just simply moving asylum seekers around and out of hotels and into alternative accommodation. I mean, I think most people can see that. But she then goes on to say about how that she would do more to try and ban individuals. She wants tougher rules on permanent settlement and all of that. And the first thing I'm afraid that crosses my mind is, OK, fair enough, Kemi Badenoch wasn't leading the Conservatives at the time, but haven't the Conservatives had the chance to do more in the first place? And had they have done more, maybe we wouldn't be in half the mess we're in.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think that the Conservatives did fail on immigration during their time in government. And I think the fact that Kemi wants to put forward different policy than we had in government is proof that she accepts that. And I think a Conservative government undoubtedly would do better on immigration than a Labour government, because a Labour government...
But would it do as well as a Reform government?
Well, I'm not sure, because lots of the policy on immigration is very much the same. I know that the Conservatives and Reform both agree on leaving the ECHR, which I think is essential to cut down the number of people coming to this country, because that's the reason why we can't just tell them no, because we're in the ECHR.
But is that the reason we can't say no, or is that the excuse that our pathetic political elite give us? Because if you hark back, and this is always the example given, so we know it can be done where possible. Look at what happened with David Cameron when he was told he can't revoke prisoners' rights to vote. And yet, that's exactly what he did. The ECHR said one thing, Cameron decided, no, we're not going to give prisoners the vote, and he stuck to it. So they can ignore the ECHR when they want to.
Yeah, I think there is an element of that, and especially because there's so much political weight on not solving this issue, because backbenchers in almost all parties, but especially Labour, have this pressure to keep on with immigration, and the voting coalitions have this pressure on Labour to keep on with this. But I think that the tides have changed since when the Conservatives were in government. There is a lot more pressure on the government to do more on immigration. I think if there was a Conservative government tomorrow, they would do so much more.
That isn't half the problem, and I understand what you're saying, but from what I can see, as someone who, look, has been mainly Conservative in thinking all my life, it doesn't mean I've voted for them all my life, but it certainly means that I can relate more to Conservative policy. Don't you think that half the problem is that so many of the stronger, more traditional Conservative figureheads and politicians have now sort of jumped ship and gone over to Reform? So I see it as even less chance that if the Conservatives were in power tomorrow, that they would somehow miraculously correct so many of the errors of their ways. Let's not forget, you know, it was Boris Johnson who really was quite obsessed over the whole net zero thing as well. It's very easy to blame Ed Miliband for all of it, but the truth is the Conservatives are just as bad on that front. So I can't really see sort of why they'd be any better on immigration now. If anything, they'd be weaker.
I just think we really have to note that the political climate has changed a lot in the last 10 years. If we look back to 10 years ago, people were a lot more lenient to immigration because they hadn't seen the effects of it. But we are seeing the effects of it today. We are seeing, like you said, there's one person who's got citizenship or indefinite leave a minute. Like, people are seeing that now.
Who do you think should be granted citizenship, by the way? So that if any, because to my mind, and this may be a bit brutal, but I'd be interested to know what you think, by the way. 0344 499 1000. Who should be granted indefinite leave to remain? Who should be granted settlement status in the UK? Do have your say on that. But what do you think the answer to that is, Anna? Because from my opinion, I believe anyone who comes here illegally, no one should. I
agree with you. I don't think anyone who comes here illegally should get citizenship, because having British citizenship is a privilege, because Britain is a great country and we have a great culture. And we need to preserve that, and we can't just give anyone citizenship. If you don't agree with British values, you shouldn't have a British passport, and you shouldn't receive British benefits, and you shouldn't receive British social housing. I think that's simple, and I think most people agree with that.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think it's simple, but who knows? Let's have a look at what some of the messages are that have come in already. This is from Lorraine. It says, Phil, Badenoch has proved that she cannot be trusted. Her defence of a convicted neo-Nazi and her disgraceful lies about Maloney criticising Reform and Farage proves, firstly, She has not changed, and secondly, the Tories are not a safe pair of hands. Her duplicitous behaviour is unacceptable, but I am glad we have seen it. Ed Davey stating in the Telegraph that he would work with any party, including the Conservatives, to prevent reform, shows how sinister the establishment, including Badenoch, are. They would do anything to subvert the will of the people and democracy. The Tories failed us in the 14 years they were in government, and if Kemi thinks that copying reform policies will get her into number 10, she is mistaken. Strong words there from Lorraine. How do you react to that?
Well, a lot was said there. One thing that sprung to me was the story of Ed Davey saying that he would work with the Conservatives. I think that Ed Davey is just saying that to mess with the Conservatives. I remember a few months ago there was the story, Ed Davey said that he would work with Labour, and all the Tories were like, yes, this is our golden card to tell people not to vote for Lib Dems.
But at the same time, though, Liberals did team up with the Conservatives in 2010 to form the coalition government of that day and age, so, and to all surprise, it did work. They were in government for the full 4 years.
But I think that the Lib Dems and the Tories have both changed a lot since then. The Lib Dems have become a lot more comfortable coalescing with people far, far, far to the left. We see in Birmingham their coalition with the Greens and Independents and the completely crazy stuff that they are putting through. A so-called Liberal Party putting a ban on flying flags. It's crazy.
Well, it is, but of course it's because they are liberal, allegedly, and believe in freedom for all, that they just think that the flag is being weaponised to try and cause some sort of intimidation. And on that very note, by the way, you may have heard me mention it earlier on, that there is this other story in the news today that I personally find absolutely revolting. It's to do with Birmingham Council. Birmingham City Council, they're seeking a High Court injunction to actually remove unauthorised British flags from the city's streets. Now, it's curious, actually, that in itself, when they're seeking a High Court injunction to remove unauthorised British flags, technically speaking, if those flags have been put up without any authorisation, they shouldn't need an injunction to remove them. They could just remove them if they really wanted to. So read between the lines on that, if you will. But they say that it's necessary to protect public safety and their staff, and also community cohesion. Well, I'm very, very confused by this, because to my mind, what better way to bring a community together and let them know that they are one by flying the same flag the country over?
Yeah, exactly. The beauty of the flag is that it represents everyone in this country. And I could understand some logic behind it when a lot of these DIY flagpoles on lampposts come up. It can look a little bit run down after a few days with a bit of rain.
Are you suggesting it's a bit tacky?
I like it. I like the sentiment, but sometimes it can be a little bit tacky after some classic British rain and wind. I
mean, you say, of course, I think what the answer to that is, and people go mad with this because I'm fairly sure there are probably better things to spend the money on. But actually, if councils did what so many other countries do, which is actually invest money in decent, strong flags that fly from the lampposts, well, then actually people wouldn't feel the need to do that anyway. If you stop and think about it, I don't know how well-travelled you are, Anna, but if you think about some of the other countries out there, I've certainly been quite lucky with some of the places I've been to. And this seems to happen more outside of Europe than it does anywhere else, but there are some parts of Europe. You actually go just down a simple main road in a lot of countries, and they will very proudly fly their country's flag for no reason other than they're proud of it. And yet, for some very peculiar reason, in this country, we seem to be taught to hate the flag. We seem to be brought up to believe it's some sort of symbol of evil, as if somehow it is the very essence of all that was dreadful about the United Kingdom over the last couple of hundreds, if not thousands of years. I just think that the world has been tipped on its head. This country is bonkers. How can we hate our flag? I love it.
I think some of that comes with sort of British modesty, where we don't want to sort of hark our flag at people. But I think that's silly because it is a symbol that unites us. It's the Union flag.
Well, it should do.
And all this money that we spend on Pride in Place grants, I think that we could have a lot more Pride in Place if we actually shoot if we actually showed our pride in place by putting up some more flags.
Well, it's amazing how we don't seem to have any shame whatsoever in flying certain other flags that have absolutely no country recognition whatsoever. They may be some sort of political movement, but they sure as heck ain't to do with any particular land. As ever, with any of the stories that we are covering this evening, you are so welcome to have your say. I would absolutely love to hear from you, as would Anna, by the way. You know, it's not just me. We'll both have a natter with you. Your opinion matters, so let us know what you think. You've heard at least about the story about the flags being forcibly removed by Birmingham City Council, potentially. They're looking to seek an injunction on that. And you've also absolutely heard about the number of people who have been granted some sort of citizenship here in the UK, and indeed Kemi Badenoch saying what she would do about it. What do you think? Who should be granted citizenship? Who should be allowed to live in the UK? 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Get in touch, have your say. Send a WhatsApp message. You can also text 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Otherwise, it disappears off into the ether and we'll never see it. And that'd be a terrible waste. Please note that calls are charged at the national rate, and also for text message, one standard network rate message applies. The home of common sense continues in just a moment. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good evening to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on the home of common sense. Absolutely want to get as much of your interaction this evening as we possibly can. So please feel free to get in touch and have your say. 0344 499 1000 and take some of your calls in just a tick. But I want to read out a couple of messages that have come through. This one's from Zarina, who says, "Hi Phil, anyone who enters illegally should never receive residency, leave to remain, or citizenship. The government tried to tell us that we needed talented and educated people to enter our job market. So I would argue that those professional people who, like me, would like to come over, we should make it easier for them to do so. Amen to that. However, I am concerned that the number of unemployed British people is on the rise. We must educate our own people to a higher standard of behaviour, decency, as well as attainment. Radical change, radical common sense is required." Conservative commentator Anna Ridgway is in the studio with me this evening. How do you react to Zarina's message there? Because I really struggle to argue with any of that.
I mean, I completely agree that we have a problem in this country where young people finish school or graduate from university and they are entering a job market where there just aren't any jobs going around.
You see, so here's the thing, actually, on that front, because this is very interesting. When you say there are no jobs, I know why you say that, but I actually beg to differ. I think there are plenty of jobs out there, but what we have done is for so many decades now we have told people of this country, you're too good to do those jobs, and therefore they refuse to do them. And then this means that in turn we have to import a load of, in inverted commas, cheap labour. A policy basically started under Tony Blair from his government from 1997 onwards. You know, when he was making a fuss about education, 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 and saying how people need to go to university regardless of their background. As admirable as that sentiment might be, the truth is what it's actually done is a couple of things. Number one, it has paved the way to flood the country with cheap labour, including individuals who really are quite unpalatable to even be in this country. You know, let's forget the labour side of it. You know, this is a consequence of what we're seeing about the illegal migration as well. But also what it's done is it has persuaded people not to work within their means. And as much as I understand why people should aim as high as possible, for example, I've always been fascinated with the world of medicine. I always loved the idea of potentially doing something like surgery. But the truth is I'm not academic, so there is no way I would ever get to medical school. But there is a way to work within my means. And we need to teach people to be proud to work within their means, not ashamed.
I have 2 points to say on that. The vacancy, so the ONS put out that vacancies are at an almost all-time low. Since 2014, they are at the lowest. So there's about 2.5 people looking for a job for every job there is. But I mean, I do think that your point is fair, that lots of people go to university for 3 years and then they don't want to take a job as a shopkeeper or something. But you also have to remember that they need a return on investment. They've spent or gotten into debt so much money that even if they get a minimum wage job, they're never going to be able to pay back their student loan. So at that point, you might as well go on benefits.
Which is what a lot of people seem to do. Now, the other story I mentioned just before was that about Birmingham City Council, and I know that there was more that you wanted to add to this, Anna, but we're going to bring Georgina, who is in London, into the conversation as well. A very good evening to you, Georgina.
Good evening, Phil. Good evening, Anna. I'm absolutely disgusted with the way Birmingham Council think that they have a right not to fly the British flags. I mean, I know there is a large ethnic portion in Birmingham. I'm aware of that. But these people, these councillors, are working for and on behalf of the British people. No other ethnicity should come before the British in England. They shouldn't. Britain is Britain, and we have our own flags. We don't want any other flags in Britain. We don't want the Palestinian flag flying in Britain. I don't agree with that. No other flags but the British flags. All these trans flags, they want burning. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick of us being vilified for the sake that we are proud for our country and our flags and everything it stands for. Men have died in world wars, Phil.
Georgina, I find it hard to argue with that. The only thing I would challenge slightly, though, is you say about trans flags and things like that want burning. Do you think... No, but you say yes there, but hang on a second. But do you think that the rate of intolerance that has been demonstrated by those on the hard left, do you think that those who are on the right would be any better if they start saying that we should burn flags that the left hold dear to them? Do you see what I mean?
Well, when those flags, Phil, advocate the mutilation of children, which is what we're talking about here. If people want to dress up, in men in women's clothes and women in men's clothes, and play dress up, that's their business. I don't want any part of that. They should do that in the privacy of their own home. We shouldn't have them parading through the streets in front of children twerking, and they should not be, you know, giving children lessons in what trans means. You know, cut your tig-lig off. You know, you can have a tig-lig if you're a girl. This is wrong. They are confusing our children.
Now, Georgina, hang on, because this is a conversation. It's not a rant. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I do want to have a conversation with you. But in terms of with the you say about how it shouldn't be that they should be kept to themselves and not on the streets. I personally, here is my thinking, I don't really care. If someone wants to walk around and wear a dress, a man wants to wear a dress, it's not necessarily something that I personally recognise as being behaviour I would display. But at the same time, I am a great believer in live and let live. What I have a problem with is trying to tell people en masse that those who don't recognise this as behaviour that they would adopt or that they would necessarily say, I'm trying very hard to use the word, not to use the word, sorry, normal, because I think normal is quite divisive, because to some people that is normal and we shouldn't dismiss that. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that I have a problem with being told that I'm wrong for thinking the way I think. Does that make sense? So I don't have a problem with someone doing whatever they want to do, but don't tell me I'm wrong for thinking that that is not behaviour that I personally want to see me or anyone in my family adopt.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%, Phil, but I also have to say that the government and governmental bodies and schools are telling us and our children what we should be thinking, what we should think is normal and natural. And, you know, it's like you said, it's two ways. You know, the trans community are the trans community. They do what they do. I don't particularly want to see it, and I don't want any of my children seeing that. My children have grown up now, but I'm quite sure I wouldn't want my grandchildren seeing that. You know what I mean? We are a tolerant society, but when we're getting, you know, people saying we can't fly our flags in our own country, this, for me, is abhorrent. You know, what flags are we supposed to fly if we can't fly the Union, the Union flag or the St. George's Cross? What flags are we supposed to fly? Are we supposed to fly?
Well, I dare say, I think there are
flag?
some people who we know what flags they want to fly. It's a sign that they want to remove British culture from these very shores. But the most important thing we do is that we don't let them get to that point. But Georgina, just out of interest, one thing that I really want to pick up on very quickly because I'm intrigued, and it's, again, not necessarily disagreeing with you, I just want to hear it from you. You say that you don't want your children or your children's children to see this. Why is that?
Why? Because I think it's you didn't want to say the word normal, but I'm going to say I think it's very abnormal for men to run around.
But it is to you, but it's not to them, is it?
Well, that is their business, but I don't want to have to see parades of it all the time. You know, this sort of trans, and I mean, I have a son that's gay. You know, and I live with that. As long as my son's happy, I live with that. But he doesn't go out parading down the streets telling everyone he's gay. I think these kind of things need to be kept to yourself. It's your own private business, Bill. You know?
Listen, and Georgina, I totally agree. This is my point exactly. I have said, if I've said 1,000,001 times, I don't care who someone is, what they are, what religion they want to follow, what lifestyle they want to lead, but don't tell me I'm wrong for living my life the way I want to lead it. Georgina, we'll leave it there for no other reason than time is against us, and I very much want to give Anna the last word on this subject, but thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate it. 0344 499 1000 if you want to chime in on the conversation. Anna, you can hear the passion in Georgina's voice there. I think she speaks for a great number of people.
Yeah, I think that we have to draw a fine line of protecting young people and children and also letting people express themselves how they want to do. I think that if you're an adult and you're not harming anyone in doing so, you should be able to call yourself whatever you want, no matter if I or someone else doesn't agree with it. That's because we live in a free country and we let people say and do what they want as long as it's not harming anyone else.
Absolutely. Anna, it's been a treat. Thank you so much for popping in this evening. Really appreciate your time. Conservative commentator Anna Ridgway there. If you want to have your say, you're most welcome to do so. Coming up in just a moment. Oh, hold on to your braces, my goodness me, because broadcaster and author Russ Kane will be offering his thoughts on some of the day's big news stories. Very much look forward to hearing what my old buddy has to say on that front. In the meantime, though, your messages are still very much welcome. 0344 499 1000 if you want to call or send a WhatsApp. And then if you want to text, it's 87222. Start your message with the word talk, because your opinion matters. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening to you. This is Indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave with you here on Late Night, with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. Please do keep those messages coming in. You know full well I love to hear from you, and this show simply wouldn't be the same without you. And also, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, no one wants to hear me for 2.5 hours more. Come on, just have your say. Like this message here from John. It says, hi Phil, here in Northern Ireland, we have had 1 or 2 problems with flags down through the years, as you may have heard. He goes on to say that... okay, all right, fine. So I don't fully understand that message, so I'm not going to read all of that, John, but thank you very much indeed. The joys of live proofreading. This one here comes from Lee. Lee says, long-time listener, I'd like to complain about another aspect of life that has been affected by allowing too many different cultures into this country. And he says that apparently... Oh, apparently, okay, so there's apparently some sort of cab company that's saying it seems to have more activity than usual because of drivers using prayer time. He says this should be banned in this country. He says, I'm C of E, I couldn't give a hoot about religion and should not be because of some ritual or whatever people believe in. Hopefully you read this out before I fall asleep, as I've taken my tablets. Well, Lee, that's very reassuring to know that you couldn't wait until the end of the show to take your tablets, but I'm grateful all the same that you felt obliged to message in. Oh dear, oh dear. Right, it's all good. Look, believe me, with me on, you don't need to take the tablets. I'm a much more organic option, I promise you. Anyway, speaking of organic options, someone who's never on tablets, he's always bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and always got something to say, was not available. So instead, let's speak to Russ Kane, who joins us now, broadcaster and author, down the line, live from somewhere out there in the ether. Good evening, Russell.
Good evening. I'm just going to take my tablets. Just hang on a minute.
Yeah,
what I particularly enjoyed about the beginning of the show, what I particularly loved about it, was your little musical interlude as you were reading.
Oh,
and you're going through the text, and you're just got a text here, and da, 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 da. It's kind of a little musical thing.
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, it was nice. I was hoping for a little bit of
I was going to say, would you I tell you what
it
it is, Russ. Would you like us to have a little chat with our creative department and get them just to create some bed music for you just every time that you speak, just to speak over it?
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should.
You know, a bit of Motley Crue. A little bit of Motley Crue, maybe.
Perfect.
A bit of Metallica, perhaps.
Yeah. OK, no, that's great. We'll look into it for you and we'll get back to you.
You are too kind.
Russ, there's something that I'm itching to get your thoughts on because Michael Gove, remember him? He's the former education secretary. He's apparently accused Cambridge University of peddling what he calls toxic nonsense to the next generation of teachers. And in particular, he singled out a professor, Hilary Kremen, head of Cambridge's Teaching and Training School, over her educational philosophy and her book, Rewilding Education. Now, Gove says that the book rejects discipline, knowledge and testing, while Kremen argues that the current school system may be beyond redemption. But he also criticised university education departments for failing to embrace schools he says are transforming opportunities for disadvantaged children. I know that you feel strongly as I do on this, but how do you feel about the state of our education system and what is being taught to the next generation?
You came on the key word here, Phil Dave, and the word was discipline. Unpopular, terrible, what is it, Victorian, can't say the word, the D word, discipline. And it runs through every aspect of our life. And it's not something which is onerous. It's something which I think just helps us to get on as a nation, as people, mixing in the public, that discipline, it has to start at home and it has to start at school.
But you see, the problem is, you're right, of course, as ever. I know full well that you have great knowledge of these things. But isn't the problem that the fact that we have now so many successive generations of teachers and of parents who won't even remember discipline, how can we now train that generation to discipline the next generation when they are no longer familiar with it?
The genie is out of the bottle. That's the problem. You know, in my head, I hear the word teachers and I'm thinking of somebody, you know, 50 with a gown, and I know, ridiculous. Okay, I get it. And I'm sure all your viewers and listeners are going, what, you know, wacko, Jimmy Edwards. Yeah, sure.
There's one for the kids.
Hey, well, here's one for the kids, Harry Lawler. So the thing is, but without discipline, yeah, they probably never had discipline. They've probably never had discipline in their lives, but we're entrusting them to look after our children. And I really wonder if that, you know, train has left the station and it's too late. But without discipline comes chaos. And
well, as we're seeing time and time again.
But that's it. You know, that's why I prefaced my comments with, before everyone thought, well, what are you talking about? Corporal punishment? No, of course not. But there are actions, right? There are consequences for your actions. And this notion that everybody's got a get out of jail free card for whatever reason is nuts. It's just not right. There are consequences for your actions. And yet, and it all sort of goes into one horrible, muddy pile that you can seem to do whatever you like and there's no problem. Just
yeah, but you see, I think where we've gone wrong is that there are consequences for consequences. In other words, if parents try and discipline their children, they're the ones who get in trouble. So it's not really a wonder that people don't want to discipline now because they themselves are worried. I can't believe it. I saw this about, this must have been, well, I was still working in the other place, so this must have been at least 10 years ago, I reckon. And I remember that there was an outing, a school outing, where we had a group of children come into that particular place of work, and one of the pupils was so excited to be there that she went up to go and give her teacher a hug. Mm-hmm. And I've never forgotten this. The teacher said, no hugging, no, don't come near. And it was because she was worried about having to be seen in contact with a pupil. And you know full well that teachers would have been taught now for many years, no contact with children, even if it's something as nice as a hug. Not allowed to do that. Even if they brush against them. Some people would try and take it as an act of assault. It's ridiculous.
But that is ludicrous. I mean, that is absolutely ludicrous. We got all of this from America. And I remember, you know, and the no-win, no-fee lawyers, you know, the ambulance chasing guys and everything. And I remember arguing with a friend of mine who passed a few years ago saying, oh, that'll never happen in Britain. You don't know what you're talking about. He says, oh, it's coming. I can assure you. It's coming. He was absolutely right. I was absolutely wrong. You're brushing past somebody accidentally. I don't think we need to go to court over that. But when I think about it, you know, you try and find a happy medium. When I think about my own school days, a lot of those teachers would have been imprisoned.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, believe me, I mean, but it's not even your school days, Ross. I mean, me as well, I promise you. I distinctly remember sort of if there was someone who was misbehaving, they soon knew about it. For example, there was one time where even I might have got into a bit of bother myself, where... Surely not. He says almost convincingly. Yeah. What happened is that it was just before registration, so it was first thing in the morning. And now, I don't think this is any hidden secret, that I am somewhat vertically challenged, being a stature of about 5'8". You know, you can imagine as a child I wasn't exactly tall. But one way or another, what happened is that just before registration, before the teacher got to the classroom, some of the taller chaps were messing around, going from classroom to classroom, and they were blocking the doors. Now, the doors had windows in them, but if you were tall enough to see who was the other side of the window, I wasn't. And what happened is that there were about 2 lads next to me who were blocking the door. I thought, because they were blocking someone from another classroom coming in, but then they realised that the teacher was the other side of that door, and they ran back to their seats, leaving me to carry on blocking the door to the teacher. Eventually, the teacher bursts through the door. I've never forgotten this. I won't say her name just in case she's still alive. I doubt it, but just in case. burst through the door, and there was me standing behind the door looking a little sheepish, a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights, shall we say. She grabbed me by the collar, right, literally by the scruff of the neck,
Okay.
dragged me to my desk,
Oh, yeah.
and proceeded to yell in my face big time, saying, "What is the meaning of this, Philip Dave?" And it's like literally screaming in my face. Again, behaviour that just wouldn't be allowed now by any teacher. And to be fair, my parents, when they heard about this, were horrified. And even in those days, they absolutely stormed to the headmaster and said, you know, what kind of teacher grabs a 5 or 6-year-old by the scruff of the neck, and what's the matter with you? Who are you employing? That kind of thing. So they were, as parents, very upset about it. But you just think now, I mean, that teacher could be in prison for doing that.
I'm just fascinated because that was a very graphic and wonderfully pictorial story.
Oh, thank you.
Compare my singular pleasure, but compare it to stuff that I did. I mean, I had the you-know-what beaten out of me at school, all around my face. I laughed at something. The teacher didn't like it. He was in a terrible mood and absolutely beat the hell out of me. I mean, the guy would have been done for assault now. Or I remember the RI, or religious instruction or religious education lessons, and the guy, the reverend, would pick up the board rubber, because we had chalkboards, yes, I know, and just throw it at a kid's head. And these, you know, you're probably too young, but they had big, your viewers will know what we're talking about, and the listeners, big wooden back board rubbers. They were heavy, man. That was solid wood.
Well, I totally remember blackboard marker, the blackboard erasers and stuff like that.
The one with the big, yeah, and that would be thrown right at the kid's head.
And not to mention also the chalk dust in them as well. Let's not forget.
Kind of the least, or just getting the board rubber and putting it all over you as a thing. That was the least of it, apart from the corporal.
You've still got some in your hair.
Yay!
More from Russ in just a moment, and more from you as well. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Have your say, get involved. I'm going to read out some of your messages and get Russ's reaction and your reaction to that story, more stories, so much more, all through the rest of the next couple of hours. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lee says, wow, is that Russ Kane, the flying eye? Love the flying eye. Bring him back, please. All right, he's here. Hello, Russ.
I'm here. Thank you very much. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Looks like someone's old enough to remember you.
Yes,
So-
yeah, move on.
This message here comes from Joanna, Russ, I want to get your reaction to this because I'm fuming by this. It says, "Hi Phil, areas banning British flags with a 2-year sentence if you hang them." So in other words, if you were to put the flags up, they're now saying that potentially you could receive up to 2 years in prison. But now a Kent taxi firm has been ordered to remove Remembrance poppies and Lest We Forget signs from its taxi fleet cars. I'm sorry, what?
I'm trying to be so careful.
Now, I do have to say, I've only got Joanna's word for this. I'm not saying it's not true, Joanna. I just haven't seen this, so I'm going on what you say. But even so, what?
Let's wind this back a little bit, all right? Because this is a subject that absolutely gets under my skin and I find infuriating. And I know that most people do. I used to live in America. That's not what people find infuriating. But I used to live in America for a number of years. And everywhere you went on the public buildings, in people's front yards and all the rest of it, was the Stars and Stripes, right?
Always.
Because the people were patriotic. And I'm not down in Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia. You know, I'm in Connecticut and New York City. That's where I'm working on Madison Avenue, right? And there's flags everywhere. And it's part and parcel of the life. It's part and parcel of the civilization of the time. Because people were proud to be living there. Proud. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be flying the flags. This whole business is not about flags. It's nothing to do with flags. It is the demonization of the past, the erosion of history, whether you like the history or not. But history was history. It was there, right? The erosion of that, and worse than that, seeing everything through the prism of a 2026 viewpoint, which you can't do. You can't criticize people for what they did years and years and years ago with the viewpoint that we have now. Because to me, that's the same as someone using semaphore, you know, back in the day from ship to ship and going, well, why aren't you WhatsApping them? Well, you can't, because different time. That's kind of where I'm at. I think it's disgraceful. If the Remembrance poppies, as your lovely listener has said, is being removed from a taxi firm, that is despicable.
Well, I would like to remind anyone listening, forget the taxi firm, just anyone listening, one of the reasons why we are allowed to live the way we do in this day and age is because of all of those who made the ultimate sacrifice during the World Wars. Yes. So whatever you think of it, if it weren't for them, it's perfectly likely that we would be speaking German now, which, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not so sure how I'd feel about being on air speaking German, but I guess I'd never know any different.
You'd have probably learnt it by now.
Maybe. But at the same time, you know, that's just one example of how different things could be. We would have been under a totally different rule. And we wouldn't be able to do half of what we do and take for granted now because of those individuals who gave their lives so we didn't have to. What the heck is wrong? I actually think, truly I believe it should be a punishable offence to denigrate those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
It's despicable, it's dishonourable, and I'd like to see the faces of the people who are doing this. Because we just see it in the
funny how
news.
we never do we?
But you see, that's only just popped into my mind. Yes, I do have a mind. That we always hear, so-and-so council says, you know, and we all seem to sit there with chains and, you know, looking very posh, you know, looking like George from Coronation Street or something. We don't know what these people look like. We don't know who they are. I'd like to know who is making these mad decisions and
but
why.
Also, I'd like to know why they're even being put out there, because, okay, I mean, I suppose it depends who it comes from. If it's someone in authority, then technically speaking, by law, you have to listen to them. But the fact that they are being so widely discussed and put out there in the news, and, okay, yeah, you could argue I'm just as guilty, I'm talking about it with you now, surely all that's doing is it's sort of giving it gravitas. It's actually sort of saying, OK, yeah, maybe you've got a point to this. Well, I'm saying you don't have a point. I think you're insane.
They don't have a point.
I think you're absolutely mad. If you think removing poppies or any sort of lest we forget reference, I think you're not only mad, I think you're revolting. I don't think you should be lucky enough to live in this country.
I think it goes further. I'm going to say this. I'm just going to put my hand in the hornet's nest here. I think it's traitorous.
Yes, totally.
I think it is traitorous behaviour to the United Kingdom. How dare you? How dare you?
On the subject of discipline, which we were saying earlier, Ian says, school discipline. Wow, Mr. Chadwick, our geography teacher in the 1960s, used to hit your fingers with a 12-inch ruler edge. With a 12-inch ruler
the
edge. I still think that system was better than the anarchy in schools today. Thank you for that, Ian. Look, I mean, obviously we can't advocate violence towards anyone, let alone children. But at the same time, I do recognise, like so many, that it would appear as though that this country was a far more decent place when discipline played some part in people's lives. We seem to have gone too far the other way now.
So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Did you respect your teachers, Phil?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the reference I made before about saying with that teacher who grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, OK, yes, it was deeply unpleasant. Yes, it is. I suppose the word is traumatised, but I don't know. But it has certainly stuck with me, let's put it that way, for the rest of my days. But I promise you, I never misbehaved in front of that teacher ever again.
So the other question is, one, you respected the teachers. Two, were you aware that there were consequences for your actions and misbehaviour?
Yeah, it's... Yes, is the answer.
Yes.
I mean, what am I supposed to do? Argue against it?
No.
Yes.
But you see, that this is kind of in a gentle, roundabout way, trying to prove the point. I think, and we're both on the same side of this coin, is that without that, it is anarchy, and the word was just used. You can't have anarchy. You can't have this chaos. You can't.
Well, ideally not, but yes. Now, look, there's a couple of other stories I want to try and shoehorn in before we get to the top of the hour. So let's move on to this, because, in particular, I don't know whether or not you've seen... You remember, obviously, this revolting act, Bob Villan. You must remember them from Glastonbury.
I'm trying not to, but sadly I do.
Well, OK, so the front man, one Pascal Robinson Foster, who seems to have got more publicity on this station than anywhere else I've ever heard of him from. However, it's fine. It's important to talk about him because of what a disgusting creature he is. He will now face no charges over chance of death to the IDF at a pro-Iran, hear yourself here, pro-Iran rally in central London. Now, this is not to be confused with the same chant he made at Glastonbury a little while ago. This is a separate incident. The Metropolitan Police say that it has dropped its investigation while recognising the concerns caused, how very generous of you, thank you, particularly amongst London's Jewish communities. Robinson Foster, by the way, had also led the same chance, as I said, at the Glastonbury Festival appearance in 2025. After that was dropped by Avon and Somerset Police, no further action was taken. Representatives from the Jewish community have said the latest decision is just leaving people feel fearful and abandoned. Now, I openly admit and speak about the fact that I am Jewish. I don't feel fearful. I don't feel abandoned. I feel incensed with anger, because I know full well, if it was anyone else, could you imagine? Let's reverse it totally. Let's look at an inverted example of this. Let's say that it was a pro-Israel rally where some right-leaning singer was chanting death to Islamism, right? Or death to the Iran Revolutionary Guards, which of course is obviously heavily steeped in, allegedly heavily steeped in Islamic beliefs, but no Muslim I've ever met in this country, let's put it that way. Could you just imagine the reaction then? They'd go mad. They'd be prosecuted to the nth degree. Again, two-tier policing.
Oh, it's a lot worse than that. It's a heck of a lot worse than that. How many times have we seen in the papers that somebody speaking about the Bible, the New Testament, of the teachings of Jesus, has either been moved on or arrested? How did this country get to that? How?
I really don't know, because
It's incredible,
it seems
but it's not by
incredibly
accident.
dramatic.
This is not an accident. This is absolutely.
But even if, okay, you say it's not an accident, but even if it is by design, who on earth designed it, and how on earth did enough of them get to a position of power where they could implement the blooming
Well,
thing?
that's very easy. Every story that we've talked about tonight, right? They're all linked. They're all linked by the same thing: the erosion of history, the erosion of cultural identity, of who we are, of who we were. All that. So, you start with the flags, and people say, no, it's just a flag. Who cares? I care. You care. I would say the vast majority of the public care that if you want to fly the Union flag, you should be allowed to.
And what a perfect note to end on. Russ, thank you so much.
Oh, I thought I was here till 1 in the morning.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
brought
You can
sandwiches
stay
and
here till
everything.
1 in the morning,
I
but I've
brought
got a
sandwiches,
couple of people
everything.
I will speak to as well. I'm sorry about that. But, it's a great pleasure as ever to be in your
thank
company on air, regardless of whether it's here or anywhere else that we may be heard
bless
together.
you. Yes,
so thank you
indeed.
very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Broadcaster Russ Kane there, offering us some very wise words of wisdom and just reacting to some of the really quite shocking news that we've heard today. But up next, we are going to go through the front pages for Saturday morning. So I'm going to be doing that in the company of young Bob. So I do hope you'll stick around for that, because young Bob here for the whole hour, coming up next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good evening to you. How are you doing? It's Phil Dave with you here on the home of common sense. This is Talk. With you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. And for this hour, My goodness me, have we got a treat. Well, you've missed a really rather packed first hour, it has to be said. So if you've just tuned in, where have you been, for goodness sake? But don't worry, there's still plenty more to come. What we're going to do is going to go through all of the front pages for Saturday morning, and I'm going to be doing that in the splendid company of young Bob. He's right here in the studio. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm doing fantastic. I mean, finally, it was the end to this supposed drought. So, you know, the weather's already returning back to quintessential Britishness, I see.
Absolutely, yes. And soon we will be talking about flooding rather than the drought. And we'll also blame that on climate change. And then we'll be talking about snow in the winter and we'll be blaming that on climate change. Or there'll be those of us who are just sensible who say, yeah, maybe the climate is changing, but maybe it's just the weather. Who knew? Any odd way. I'm not a meteorologist. Let us have... Actually, do you know what? First and foremost, I've got a couple of messages I must read out, just because otherwise it's going to be too far from where we've been. But Debs has messaged saying, oh, my goodness me, Russ Kane speaks for all of us. Don't tell him that, but OK, yeah, that's fine. And Rob here says, hi, guys. This is in reference to myself and Russ before. In Spain, school discipline, junior school, late 70s, the dreaded slipper. Oh, my goodness me. 6 of the best on the backside in front, and the whole class, it kept us in line. Now, look, again, I stand by. I don't think anyone wants to return to a time where children are attacked by adults. But can't help but notice that since the demise of discipline, there certainly seems to be an issue with the way that certain younger people are behaving. Fortunately, Bob, that doesn't apply to you.
It could very much be, you know, you never know.
Well, quite, yes. I mean, you could just be unruly and you're just behaving for the camera, but I don't think you are. Look, on the subject of discipline in school, I'm sorry, because I know this is being thrust upon you. You weren't expecting this per se. But where do you stand on it? Because this is actually off the back of Michael Gove, former Education Secretary, attacking educational institutions for really not sort of believing in traditions that ultimately give children the best start in life. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I stand, if you actually look at it, people are going to have a huge gap in basic skills and how to upkeep themselves. So we're seeing university students now not even know how to clean their own laundry. So I would say, and this also corresponds with reception teachers still needing to change children's nappies.
Absolutely.
So this is partially due to COVID, so people were locked down for a ridiculous amount of time in education, missing out on key stuff that they would have learnt. So, for example, I was locked down when I was in year 7. So the first few stages of my secondary school education, I was kept inside from not learning basic social skills to basic literacy skills, and that translates as well to GCSE outcomes.
I can certainly understand why they call you young Bob if you were in lockdown during year 7. Good gracious me. How to make me and other listeners feel old, so.
And that also corresponds as well with a lack of discipline and a decrease of punctuality. So students aren't turning up to schools at all. They're not turning up to their classes. And I feel like we're discussing two sides of the same spectrum. So you've got the extreme side of disciplining children, so people romanticising nostalgically the time that they were sort of disciplined quite violently when they were a child and corresponding that to how they're quite disciplined and structured in their life, to the opposite side of the spectrum where the society and our education has no real involvement in the development of young people, and you see this emergence of helicopter parents, people just letting their child do whatever. So
well, it's organic, as you know. I mean, that's obviously the best way to let a child discipline themselves is just be unruly, be feral, and life will teach you everything you need to know. What absolute bunkum. Right, let's go through the front pages before I say something that's going to get me into terrible trouble, because I'm not a parent, so what would I know? Front page of the Daily Telegraph, we're going to start with that. Now, actually, this was news that broke during Charlie Rowley's show, which was on between 7 and 9 this evening. And the headline on the Daily Telegraph says, America's Falklands threat to Britain. So boost defence spending or we'll withdraw support for sovereignty, says Pentagon. The United States has threatened to oppose British sovereignty over the Falkland Islands if Andy Burnham does not increase defence spending, the Telegraph can reveal. Now, I'm sort of in two minds about this, because part of me thinks it's not America's business. Then the other part of me thinks maybe this is actually America trying to help Britain where they see that our government is not helping us as it should be. So by them making this threat and almost, if you like, forcing the government's hand into increasing defence spending, maybe it's just Trump's administration's way of helping us.
Well, this is a continued theme throughout the Trump administration, they don't want to subsidise the defence of European nations. This is the sort of initial ticket of Trump within his first presidency. But also, as well, you can't leverage a country's sovereignty over a certain policy that a country isn't pursuing. So this is what the discussion of the right wing's always been. When it comes to our relationship with the Trump administration, we share several key doctrines, political beliefs, and we feel like, because they're our brothers and sisters across the pond, we can work with them. However, sometimes it does feel like we're pandering to them a bit more, like we're almost sucking up to them, as a crude way of putting it. So, like you, I'm a bit two minds about this. I don't think America can leverage a sovereignty over our own territory, but at the same time, it is a symptom of a problem, which is we rely too much on American defence.
Do you think it matters if we are, quote-unquote, pandering, though, to America? Because the number of people I've heard say that Trump seems to be the only one that is saying what so many British people wish that our politicians would say. So is it a terrible thing if we do pander to America?
If we cross-pollinate and associate ourselves too much with the Trump administration, which is doing a fantastic job, it also means that sometimes we may yoke their success onto our success. Now, Trump is a quite divisive figure here in the United Kingdom, so if he does something unpopular in the United States, it's certainly really unpopular here in Britain. So, for example, depending on how long it goes with the British electorate, say this is a really unpopular policy and a figure like Nigel Farage seems to associate himself with the Trump administration, that means there's a few points knocked off of Farage's popularity.
Also on the front page of the Daily Telegraph for Saturday morning, Burnham ducks out of debate on assisted dying. Andy Burnham has refused to back the assisted dying bill in a blow to campaigners fighting for a change in the law. I'm very clear on this. I love the way that people think this is a very complicated subject. I don't see this as complicated myself, and I'll tell you for why I don't, is because if you see the suffering that some people have to go to, you would not wish for them to extend their life longer than they have to. In exactly the same way that we do not let animals suffer when we see that they are in pain or that they are ultimately dying, why on earth we don't do this for humans is completely beyond me.
So I would like to mention that Andy Burnham's a Catholic. I'm Eastern Orthodox, so there is a degree of religiosity in this debate. I feel like every life is sanctified and made in the image of God. However, beyond that, it's a question of, well, do we entrust the government to define when someone can take their life? So this discussion really ultimately leads to where people are actually medically in pain, suffering quite a bit, their quality of life is quite poor. I do sympathise with people that hold to that position. However, it's a very slippery slope. It then dwells into, well, if I have like a mental health crisis, I could ultimately decide to make that decision of ending my own life. So not only is this position anti-Christian...
But might I say, though, Bob, and sorry for interrupting, but on that very point, there are people who, very sadly, who do suffer with mental illness who do end their life, but they do it now, and technically it's illegal because they've, if you like, in inverted commas, committed suicide. Now, fortunately, we're way past the point where we punish any living or surviving relatives for that, but back in the day, it absolutely was the case. If you committed suicide, your relatives were the one who were punished for it. No one wants to see a return to that, but at the same time, it would be nice to think that we live in a world that is so compassionate that if someone wishes to end their life, we might not want them to do so. And to those of us who are lucky enough to have, if you like, a relatively calm mind, to see that someone ending their life would be a terrible waste and a terrible tragedy, if that's how someone feels, why is anyone right to say, no, you can't do that?
Well, I don't think it's the most compassionate and sympathetic thing to do. I think it's better to say, look, struggle in your own mental health and get over this, and you can have a beautiful life. You can have a life like ours. I don't think it's the state's position to end one's life, but rather think of us as a community.
But it wouldn't be the state, it would be the individual, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm not a hyper-individualist. I don't think that people can decide whether their life ends or not. I'd like this sense of community that we have with our fellow Britons to ensure that we don't commit suicide, because that's a terrible thing. And the fear is, and I see this dialogue with a lot of other decisions like abortion, for example, this common polemic, well, even if we make it illegal, people will still go out and do it. However, if we can identify that suicide is wrong, it's not preferable, we don't want people with mental illness to commit suicide, then why are we allowing it? If there's a small portion of the population that will do it, even if it's illegal, we can seek to minimise it, but we shouldn't make it illegal and increase the pool of people that's already doing it.
But assisted dying is not for the benefit of those who wish to commit suicide, so to speak, or take their life, which is obviously the terminology we use in this day and age. It's much more about those who are in so much pain and suffering that their life is that unbearable, they don't want to carry on living.
But how do you define that?
It's up to an individual.
But that's the point. If it's up to the individual, it can be like, I have some discomfort in the day, that's why I want to commit suicide.
But that is up to them.
But I don't want to create a culture, especially for young people who are in a mental health epidemic, where they...
Totally and utterly, I understand that completely. But if ultimately we are talking about here people whose lives are so... let's say, all right, well, supposing that we were to say that assisted dying is restricted to those in physical pain rather than mental pain, would that change your stance?
No, because where would you define unbearable physical pain?
The individual has to choose that. The individual is the one who says, I'm in so much pain that I can't carry on living. It is not for someone else to say...
If I stub my toe and I say that beats unbearable...
But that's up to the individual. But
so if I stub my toe, I can commit suicide?
But it is totally and utterly not up to any government to turn around and say that, well, we don't think you're in enough pain, you've got to carry on going.
I don't think it's the purpose of the state to facilitate suicides, though.
No, but this is not about the purpose of the state to facilitate it. It's about to help people...
But that's what this bill would do, right?
Well, what it would do is it would show compassion to those who are going through unbearable suffering and don't want to carry on living anymore.
But it's an ambiguously defined concept, which means anyone can feel that. As you said, if I stub my toe and I feel like it's unbearable pain, I could commit suicide according to your definition. And I think that the position of the state is to uphold life, property and prosperity, right? I think that's the basic principles of classical liberalism that came out of the Enlightenment. And I think that's totally contrary, as a constitutionally Christian nation, to facilitate assisted dying.
But, Bob, you are a clever sort of chap, OK? So, I mean, I think to keep using the reference of stubbing a toe, you know full well that it's highly improbable that someone stubs their toe and then say, I'm in too much pain to carry on. What we're talking about here are people who have life-limiting and life-altering conditions that absolutely can't stand waking up in the morning because it hurts them so much. Why is that so wrong, to show them the compassion to say, look, if you're in that much pain, you choose what you want to do?
So two things I would say to that. First of all, do we really trust the same government which arrests people for the sake of their speech to also have the utility of someone's life? And the second thing I would say is what you're saying is very similar and in contrast to like the transgender discussion, right? Because when I ask someone who believes in transgenderism, well, what is a male or female? So it's up to the individual. But that gives too much freedom to people to give idiosyncratic definitions of the word. And when you're talking about someone, taking their own life, I feel like ultimately the burden of proof for someone to define what it means to be in unbearable pain is very crucial, because I don't want the government to, first of all, have too much autonomy over people. I mean, if you want to push...
You misunderstand what I think campaigners are pushing for, because this would not see the government having autonomy over those individuals. This is the government giving those individuals the tools to decide if they have had enough of living with how they have lived for goodness knows how long. Let's look at someone, for example, with, say, motor neurons disease. Now, I thank my lucky stars that I don't know anyone who has that. We have seen many examples of it. Obviously, we've seen that rugby player who, you must forgive me, the name has completely escaped my mind at the moment, but possibly the most famous example was Stephen Hawking. And I believe that if someone is going to go through so much pain and suffering every single day of their life, surely we should be understanding enough to say, look, obviously we would far rather that you carry on living because your life is valuable, has meaning, and we want you to be here for a very long time. But then who are we to say that that individual should suffer more because we don't like the idea of giving them the tools to decide when their life should end?
I don't know. I'm a bit of a stickler for the most vulnerable within society to be empowered to commit suicide. And in fact, a lot of people who sort of push and assisted dying and abortion come hand in hand. These principles also happen to be eugenicist, because it only really benefits people who don't believe the most vulnerable within society should really exist with their own society. So for me, I feel like you know, our life and time on this earth is precious and we shouldn't have to cut it short. And I don't think the quality of your life should dictate whether you have the right to live or whether you're influenced to take that right away. In the same society that pushes that we have the right to live as human beings because we're all equal, it also works in the opposite way. We should have it for everyone, and the people who don't want to have it should have it and has to have it.
Okie doke. Obviously a very emotive subject, and certainly one that I'm keen to hear your thoughts on as well. Might I suggest, by the way, that obviously if you do want to have your say, get in touch, 0344 499 1000. And it was Rob Burrow. Thank you very much to producer Adam, who reminded me of the name that I couldn't remember just then. 0344 499 1000. Young Bob joins me in the studio to go through the front pages. I would also like to say that if, by the way, any of this discussion does affect you in any way, shape or form, and you want to talk to someone about it, then the Samaritans would be a very good place to start. Telephone number for them, 24 hours a day, is 116 123. That's 116 123. And you can also go to talk.tv/helplines. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. A very good evening to you. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. A couple of messages coming in on the subject of assisted dying. It's because young Bob is in the studio with me and we're going through the front pages for Saturday morning. And on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, one of the stories is about how Burnham ducked out of the discussion surrounding assisted dying. So, some of these messages coming in here. Joanna says, "Hi Phil, I'm on the fence with end of life. Palliative care should improve, but I wouldn't trust the government not to start working out if we were still cost effective and they refused treatment." Well, Joanna, it's a very valid point, but as I said, I don't really sort of see end of life care and assisted dying as one of the same thing. End of life care is obviously very much someone who's taken their life all the way to the end of it. And then if you're talking about assisted dying, that is an individual knowing that they are safe to choose whether or not they want to carry on living or not. This comes from someone who calls themselves a very wise lady. Bob cannot compare someone dying of leukemia or a brain tumour to someone who has stubbed their toe. Now, to be fair, so you didn't put your name here, but I did obviously say to Bob that...
But the principle is obviously that if we give the government, which we on the right largely suggest is some sort of Orwellian, almost dictatorship dictating what we can say with our own freedom of speech, then I just don't think that the same ideology would also suggest that the government can facilitate someone's individual decision-making to take someone's life. Because, first of all, once you open that can of worms, it can lead to a slippery slope in which the government can almost push for people who are certainly more vulnerable than others to go down that line.
But you see, this is where I think that the lines are really blurred, because someone such as myself, who is an advocate of assisted dying, and those who I think feel the same way, this is nothing to do with putting the power in the government's hands. Literally nothing. This is about getting them to create the bill that says that individuals have the right to choose when they end their life without fear of knowing that it's an illegal act at the moment. And that's where it's different. If we're talking about the government deciding when we live or die, that's a totally different argument. And thank goodness that's not what's on the table here.
But the government has to be the one to say that this is an illegal act, and then it has to go through doctors to then medically assess whether you're in that situation in which you are in unbearable pain. But then by that definition,
then the government already decide when we live or die. By that very definition.
No, they just decide that we all have the right to live, that this is a human right, and whether you want it or not, you possess it.
Frank has said, it just turned on, and he sort of chooses a couple of suggestive words, which I'm not going to mention. But let's just go with, you cannot compare stubbing your toe to MND, which of course is motor neurons disease, or brain cancer. So that is Frank's thoughts there. And Deb says, we in Spain have the option to sign a living will when the doctors can put us out of our misery when the time comes. Debs, thank you very much indeed for that.
I really didn't know this is a contentious issue for the right wing. I might have to...
You might have to re-examine, eh? Let's carry on going through the papers, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. We don't want to do that. So let's have a look at the front page of the Daily Mirror. King's support for tragic police families. The King has written to the families of the 2 police officers killed in the A66 horror crash. His Majesty, I will not call him by his first name, Daily Mirror, it's very disrespectful to do that to the monarch, unlike you, but I will say His Majesty made contact as detectives probe links between a gang drug feud and the road tragedy. The royal source says His Majesty was truly shocked. That's the front page of the Daily Mirror. The front page of the Daily Star, the only watch is Essex. TV Joey, I still can't tell time. Joey Essex says he still can't tell the time and was beaten by 7-year-olds in a new Gary Lineker game show. Well, that sounds thrilling in itself. It's 13 years since he told I'm a Celeb pals he was clueless. Now, OK, I'm in Daily Star. I know that obviously their raison d'etre is to offer a little bit of light relief, but it does offer, I think, a slightly more serious discussion here. Why is it that we are allowing individuals who are, how can I be delicate, dumb, to enter into the limelight and ultimately be really quite a dreadful influence, I think, to successive generations? Now, look, I'm perfectly sure that Joey Essex, as an individual, nice enough chap, but shouldn't really be making a big deal or boasting about the fact that someone can't tell the time. That's a really sad indictment on the education system of this country, and it's almost saying it's OK.
Definitely. I feel like when it comes to entertainment and media, I feel like we're almost echoing and becoming the tropes that we used to be seen as comedic. So where, for example, a genre of comedy would to be act stupid, we're now getting stupid people to be stupid for our own comedy. And young and impressionable people are consuming this content and thinking it's acceptable. And also actually relating to it as well. I know a few people, and it's probably going to be an emerging trend amongst young people who aren't literate, who can't read, who can't tell the time, who can't do mathematics, basic mathematical skills. And it's very concerning, because once that becomes normal, I don't think a teacher's going to have the resources to actually teach out of them.
It's, I think, really disconcerting, to say the least. And in fact, even I remember on this very station being on with a former colleague who is now on another channel, and discussing with her, saying that there was talk of how in examinations that schools were going to introduce digital clocks because those who were taking the exams found it so difficult to tell how much time was remaining with analog clocks. And if we're talking about examination age, one would assume that this has got to be individuals who are in their teenage years. And if by that age they still don't know how to tell the time, the answer is not let's introduce digital clocks to examinations. Let's say there is something seriously wrong with what we're teaching our children, and as a result of it, maybe we need to correct it, not sweep it under the rug. Extraordinary. Front page of the Daily Mail, headline reads, "Surrender. John Healey quit in protest at Starmer's refusal to spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2030. Now as Chancellor, he's shelved the same target, just as Putin ramps up threats." John Healey was branded a hypocrite last night, as critics said his plans to shelve his own defence spending target were akin to surrender. How do you feel about defence spending?
Well, it was definitely, initially when he stood down as Defence Secretary, a way of getting into Burnham's cabinet, because it was at the time where obviously the Starmer ship was sinking. But we definitely need to increase defence. We definitely need to enrol and enlist more people into our military. I feel like a lot of the times with the media we do ramp up the threat of Russia, but they're currently having a failed campaign in Ukraine. So
I would far rather we actually talk about the threat of Iran and China rather than the threat of Russia. But that's
exactly.
just my
I feel like it's like the bogeyman of Europe, as much as they are a threat in the short term especially. And just across the board, we do need to increase spending. But like I said, it's the...
Well, we need to save money before we spend anywhere else. This is the point. And unfortunately, we've got a bunch of cowards in government, both now and under Starmer, who refuse to take the difficult decisions through fear of it making them unpopular.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like a lot of their spending rules keep on being bent because they don't really understand basic economics.
No, I actually think it's worse than that. I think some of them do understand basic. I'm not so sure Rachel from accounts did, but I believe that some of them do understand basic economics, but they simply let the rule of popularity cloud their judgment from making the sensible decisions. And now if you look at Healey deciding to shelve his own target, I would suggest that actually that may well be because he is actually looked now at the books as Chancellor, has realised what a dire financial state we are in, and has known that his colleagues are not going to work with him to make the cuts they need to make. And therefore he's almost resigned himself to the fact that he kind of just has to shelve it to save the face of the party, which to my mind is, and this is speculation, I don't know this for certain, but this is how it comes across to me.
And also as well, this is where we're beginning to see the decision-making skills of Burnham's cabinet, where as soon as he came into government, he was like, you know, let's do small tacky stuff here and there to see myself as a bit more popular, but when it comes to issues like migration and defence, that's really where they're going to catch a lot of flack.
We will continue going through the front pages in just a moment. We will also read out some more of your messages, so do keep them coming. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. You can also text 87222, start your message with the word talk, and if you want to send a WhatsApp, it's the same number, 0344 499 1000. Your opinion matters, and after midnight tonight, we've got virtually non-stop your opinion. So get those calls in nice and early. I promise we'll get through as many of them as possible. In the meantime, we've got another half an hour in the splendid company of young Bob, going through the papers, and I very much hope in your company as well. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. It's Phil Dave with you, and my goodness me, we've reached the halfway point already. But the bad news for you is you've still got another half a show for me to go. I'm with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. But one way or another, I very much hope you will stick with me, because in the studio at the moment is young Bob. He joins me to go through the front pages. And there was one story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph that I did omit, and I did it sort of out of respect for what Bob has been through recently, because it's been no hidden secret. It has been made very public that you were really quite viciously attacked. And this story is guards hired to protect public from migrants. A reform-led council is to become the first to pay for town centre security guards to protect residents from asylum seekers. Now, Jackie has called from London and I believe wants to talk about security as well. So a very good evening to you, Jackie.
Good evening, young Bob. First of all, I would like to say I really appreciate the work that you do, and I really am concerned about your safety, and I would like to know what sort of security you have in place for your own safety.
Yeah, sure. So whenever we go in stands or we have speaking events, we have to have a minimum of security of 4 people. Unfortunately, there has been seen a trend recently because of the areas in which I live in, a lot of negative confrontations with what I do, especially when we're increasing our platform on both Instagram and TikTok. But I think that unfortunately comes with the territory, learning self-defense, basic close protection rules on how to identify threats. And it's something that you would never suspect an 18-year-old to have to learn or have to consider, especially just considering the nature of what I do. I'm not a provocateur. I just simply go out and speak to people about contentious issues that one might disagree with the ultimate aim, just simple transparency. Why do you believe in what you believe, and why do I believe in ultimately what I believe in? But it does sometimes become tricky as well, because going around the country, an 18-year-old trying to finance security of 4 constantly is very difficult. I mean, when you have Nigel Farage complaining about the same themes, you can begin to see how below the chain, below the hierarchy being me, it's even more difficult.
Bob, do you mind? Sorry, Jackie, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to anyway. Do you mind if I ask, without wishing to be impertinent, because I'm sure people would be curious about this, how do you go about funding this? Is it a case of, obviously you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but is it a case of friends and family having to chip in? Are you having to work to make it happen? How on earth does one go about affording that level of security?
Yes, it's mostly, glory be to God, monetization, or sometimes like, used to be that the church was in whipping around and trying to fund it. Sometimes people who are really concerned giving a donation, just messaging me on social media saying we'll pay for it. And also small like £5 donations as well.
The reason why I ask is just because I find it so, I'm sure I'm not the only one, and Jackie, please feel free to respond, but I feel that it is so unbelievable that we are talking about the country that I grew up in. I just can't believe that someone who is an 18-year-old public speaker has to worry about how you are going to fund your security so you don't get attacked for your own views. Jackie, just tell me I'm not the only one thinking this.
My only concern is my visual of young Bob sitting under gazebo, answering questions from anybody, and he's put himself in the same position as Charlie Kirk. That's my only concern. And God bless his heart. He's done a grand job. He's put himself out there, and I have nothing but admiration for him.
Well, there you go. Jackie has got very high praise indeed for you, Bob. So I dare say that, look, I understand completely why she's concerned, but how much does it play on your mind, especially since you went through what you went through?
For me, I get more upset when my family see this sort of thing. My mum refuses to watch anything that I do because she doesn't want to see her son being attacked. My fiance, not hearing from me, sees the videos online first. That's quite distressing. I can handle it. I remain perfectly calm. It comes with the territory, but seeing my family be incredibly upset, people I know and love. When it comes to the Charlie Kirk comparison, fortunately, well, rather unfortunately, I don't have that degree of influence, and I don't think I'm considered that much of a threat. And this is a very scary way of thinking. When it comes to a psychopathic murderer wanting to murder a politician, am I on the top pecking order, or is it some other well-established political figure? We're seeing this with like the death of Anne Whitcomb, for example, Reform MPs having to finance their own 24-hour security. So I do sometimes hide behind the fact that I'm not their top priority, but definitely what I'm saying and what I'm doing is one of the most persecuted groups here in Britain, which I don't think the left come to appreciate.
Fascinating times we live in, to say the least. Right, I think we're going to take a breather. Jackie, thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. If you want to join in any of the conversations we're having this evening, you're most welcome to do so. Let's take a breather and then we'll carry on looking through the papers in just a tick. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. A very good evening to you. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. Joining me in the studio is the marvellous young Bob. He's been very candid in that last editorial, as we say, so thank you very much indeed for that. And it's got some great reaction as well, like this from Alison. Alison says, please tell young Bob that I was worried when he got attacked, and I'm thinking after his welfare, just like the last caller was too. That was Jackie. And that's Alison in County Antrim, who also says, by the way, very flattering, love you being on late this week, Phil. I'm glad it is you who is standing in for Andre Nash, and obviously great to see you on with Bob. Alison, you're far too kind with your words. I do appreciate it enormously. And what can I say? I think I shall just crack on before my head won't fit through the door. So let's have a look at... Oh, dear, oh dear. Can we pass the rubber gloves, please? Here's the front page of The Guardian. And, OK, so let's have a look. Some of the stories, we'll start off with the lesser stories first. So that on the front page, sweetener used in chewing gum linked to heart attacks. A study suggests that xylitol, also found in ice cream and jam, is associated with higher risk of stroke. How extraordinary. That's on page 2 of The Guardian, but that's the headline on their front page. And they also say that US Navy funds running low amid Trump's war on Iran. Now, that's what The Guardian would love you to believe, that America and Israel are crumbling with their efforts to destroy the Iranian regime. But rest assured, Guardian, that they are most certainly not. But I think that it's really quite predictable the way that you would peddle the narrative that somehow Israel and America's efforts are going and falling flat on their face when they simply are not. And I tell you how I know this before anyone says, well, how would you know? You're in the UK. And that is basically off the back of the amount of suffering and attacking that was going on in Israel in the run-up to when America and Israel went into Iran, compared to what they have now. I can tell you that having been in Israel myself recently, well, it was May, so it's a couple of months ago now, that compared to my last visit, which was September last year, where I had to run to various bomb shelters because the sirens kept going off, compared to my last visit when there was not one siren, tells me everything I need to know. The Iranian regime and their proxies are desperately weakened by what Israel and America have done. And thank God for both those countries, because believe me, after they'd finished attacking Israel, possibly after they'd attacked America, they would come after us as well. So you want to thank your lucky stars that people such as Guardian journalists on this matter do not know what the hell they're talking about. Bob, how do you react to that story?
I would say it sort of feeds into what Iran has always constantly done militarily, which is try to run down the offensive abilities of both Israel and America. So I don't think the Guardian's doing the West any favours when trying to promote hit pieces like this. But, you know, I always feel like the left always constantly try to drill down this idea that America is really weak, when they're really not. They're probably the best at the military.
I was going to say, they're not in the least bit weak. They're without doubt the strongest in the West. So I don't even know what they're playing at. And also on the front page of The Guardian, we have nothing left. The flood took away everything. At least 579 confirmed dead, 1,900 missing following Nepal disaster. Now, I have said before, when I've spoken about this for the last 3 nights on The Bounce, I will say it again, I think from the comforts of this studio, it would be very wrong for us to comment on the disaster in Nepal, because, to be perfectly honest with you, none of us can understand the suffering that is going on over there. So let us not patronise them by trying. Front page of the Weekend. Burnham Bounce, Labour leapfrogs Farage in polls after he loses voters to Restore. New evidence that Prime Minister has cemented lead over Reform UK, likely to send concern rippling through Nigel Farage's party in polling for the paper. Now, I don't know about you, Bob, but if the polling has taken place in the paper and that they find that Burnham is somewhat more popular than Farage, that's not a shock when it's come from the It would be a shock if the Telegraph or the Mail or one of those papers did the polling and found the same result.
Yeah, so definitely there are other polls that suggest that Reform are a few percentage points above Burnham. However, I would say that if you're looking at more realistic data, coming from an 18-year-old, Reform and Labour are probably par on par at the moment. However, I would say that Labour have a more flimsy position in the polling, because it only takes one bad decision-making skill from Burnham to then have their polls crashing down, because then the immediate question would be, well, we had a bad Labour leader under Keir Starmer, he was the person that we knew, why do we have this new guy? So I feel like if Reform can just get their comms together, they could probably start polling back to the sort of 30% range that they were originally polling at.
Well, you see, what's curious here is I'm just doing some very basic maths. Now, my maths is not brilliant, but if the right of politics could get their act together and actually, well, come together and do something about this country, we're talking about Reform, Conservative and Restore would hold 46%. So by that reckoning, you would assume that it would be 54% that the left have if they unite. Having said that, though, according to this poll anyway, you've got Labour on 27%, Greens on 11%, so that takes it up to 38%, and Liberals on 10%, which takes it to 48%. So it actually goes to show that, you see, I did pay attention to maths in school. Ha, in your face, Joey Essex. You could argue that technically the left and right are just as divided as they've ever been in this country. It's pretty much neck and neck.
Well, yeah, that's because people now feel empowered to vote in terms of their own principles and not in terms of what is the most practical, right? People don't really live under a first-past-the-post system in their own head and their soul when it comes to voting intentions. However, when it comes to uniting the right, my suspicion is that come towards 29, it may not be formal, but we'll have this sort of informal pact where we see this trend of, the Conservatives standing paper candidates in Reform strongholds and, Reform standing paper candidates in Conservative strongholds and possibly Conservatives and Reform not standing in Great Yarmouth to restore. So, I have, in terms of practical aspects of electoral politics, this hope that there'll be an informal pact between the parties.
Well, I think, frankly, if they're all as power-hungry as they give the impression they are, they're going to have to pull together somewhere along the line. And let's read a couple of messages that have come in. This is a text message that's come from Paul in Southampton. And this was in response to the front page of the Daily Mail. We're talking about John Healey, the now Chancellor of the Exchequer, of course, beforehand was Defence Secretary under Keir Starmer. Talk. Phil, everyone was full of praise for this lefty clown when he quit his defence post. At least we all know who he is now. A socialist power-mad wannabe desperate to grab the next rung up the slippery left-leaning power ladder. If you'd seen him perform under pressure when asked how many votes we had, then we are probably safer with him in another department. We are now certain to go bankrupt, though. Better that, I suppose, than a big bomb through your roof. From Paul in Southampton, thank you for that. Terry on the text message says, "Hi, Phil. It says something about the state of the country, that when someone speaks up on the right side of politics, they are threatened and abused and vilified. It definitely smacks of communism in its basic form. We must fight it with all of our might." That's Terry, obviously referring, I should imagine, Bob, to your candid anecdote before about you being attacked in recent times. Now, it has to be said that I find the word fight a little bit, well, intriguing, because that could be interpreted in many ways, right? If you were to say fight, I don't know about you, but the first thing that comes to my mind is physical fisticuffs. And I would like to think that no one who is decent wants to see anyone getting physical just because of their political beliefs, right? Least of all, obviously, someone like yourself who has been attacked because of your political beliefs. But when it comes to fighting, the only way really to do it is to go against what traditional Conservatives have done, and that is to go against remaining silent. We all hear about the silent majority, the silent Conservative voters and things like that. This is probably going to be the biggest challenge for people who are on the right of politics, is to be vocal and feel empowered to be vocal enough and actually know that you have to say how you feel, because otherwise people are just going to come to think that this wokish nonsense, green-loving, tree-hugging behaviour is the majority of the country, where I truly don't believe it is. I actually think that the nation, by and large, probably leans slightly more to the right of centre.
Most certainly. I think translating political terms throughout the age, so where, like, I don't know, old Labour voters were quite patriotic, and I saw this in Makerfield, where a lot of the Labour voters were, hosting up Union Jacks. If you convert where their position was a few generations ago to where it is now, it's probably the sort of centre-right common sense ideology we talk about. But the sort of Trump-style language of fighting, this new revolution, this political revolution, a call to arms, there's quite generational difference on how politicians used to speak, because we now feel ourselves at this antithesis of political history where we can really change the uni-party system, and people can, their vote really matters. And this is what I'm telling people at the door whenever I'm campaigning, is that your vote actually matters. You were taught that you're part of some sort of collective where you can either vote for Labour and the Conservatives and you can sit down and be happy about it. But now you as an individual, you can go out and enact genuine change. And when we're at a time of austerity and people are genuinely broken, that cool, that channeling of energy really resonates with people.
Yeah, it really does. I think that once people know that they are entitled to their opinion, and this is a message I always try and get across whenever I'm lucky enough to sit in this chair and speak to people like yourself, Bob, or even to you, I would say that I absolutely insist all opinions count and all opinions matter. No one is wrong for holding the opinion they hold. They've got to be prepared to be challenged on it, because if we just all agreed, that would be boring. And I'm afraid that that is what you see with a lot of communist-style lunatics. They want everyone to think the same, and they want people to think that they are wrong for feeling different. But I say that everyone's opinion is important, and the most essential, I believe, if you like, fundamental to a democratic society is knowing the importance of your own mind, the essential value, if you like, of your own mind. Feel free to have whatever opinion you want, but don't cause harm to others just because they disagree with you. You don't need to get everyone to think the same. The only thing that we should all think, collectively, is that everyone is entitled to think and feel how they want. As soon as you come to that basic centre ground, suddenly there'll be no more politicians who are trying to divide and conquer us, because it won't be possible. Because everyone will have respect for each other, regardless of themselves, regardless of their religious beliefs, regardless of their skin colour, regardless of their political beliefs. All of this becomes irrelevant, because the labels in which the politicians have tried to use to divide us for so many years now, this is what we're seeing come to fruition. Divisive behaviour is causing massive rifts in this country. It's just time for us to start getting back to basic respect and recognising that people can think what they want, believe what they want, feel what they want, as long as they don't cause harm to others.
Better said than I. Yeah.
Let's have a look at this here from Glenn in Leeds. Says, for me, the fight rhetoric has always come from the left. The unions fight the Tories. Now the worm has turned. They don't like it. Glenn from Leeds, thank you very much indeed. Let's carry on looking through the front page, shall we? The front page of The Sun for this Saturday morning. Andrew's ex's comeback. First, Harry and Meg. Now, Fergie's coming home. She rents UK house after exile. Sarah Ferguson is coming back from exile just days after Harry and Meghan's return. The ex-wife of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is renting a £10,000 a week house in the home counties. Fergie, who is 60... Why do people have to put their age? See, I've never understood this in papers. Seriously, why do we need to know how old Fergie is? It doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant. Anyway, Fergie is apparently fled Britain, in inverted commas, after emails to Jeffrey Epstein were revealed. How do we feel about Fergie's return? Is it as sensational as Harry and Meghan's?
Well, you could hardly call their return sensational either.
I was being very tongue-in-cheek when I said it.
Yeah, you were.
I couldn't care less about their return.
I feel like papers like The Sun like to highlight things that British people don't really care about, and we have an overwhelming...
Oh, I object to that, Your Honour. Excuse me. First of all, you are in the building that is home to The Sun. Thank you very much indeed. And not only that, absolutely, when The Sun go on about championing pubs and stuff like that, they absolutely get to the heart of it.
Oh, well, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day.
So, well, there you go. Right, anyway. 0344 499 1000 if you want to join in any of the discussions that we are having. And then the last front page, Bob, you and I have to go through, we've saved the best to last without a shadow of a doubt, is the FT weekend, the Financial Times weekend, a Healey to defer defence spend target. Of course, we mentioned this earlier on. The Chancellor, John Healey, will shelve his own target of spending 3% on Britain's GDP on defence by 2030, when he presents his first budget in October. So I'm trying to, and obviously we've only got a couple of minutes to get our heads around this if we can, but I sure as heck can't understand it. Why does it feel as though politicians of all backgrounds now just don't take the threat of war as seriously as those of us who maybe use our eyes to see what's going on in the world around us?
I generally don't know, and I feel like asking an 18-year-old about the politician's mind is a bit different. But I think that this comes from...
Right, what do you see?
Okay, this comes from an era just before Andy Burnham, where I feel like a lot of Keir Starmer's cabinet felt like they could leave looking like they were principled. So a lot of people looked at him and said, this is a principled man, even though he's to the left, he's in the Labour Party, because he's talking about defence, and this is what the right talks about a lot. Angela Rayner did a similar thing, being a bit more vocal about Burnham's support to the unions. So it just hasn't worked. This bluff hasn't worked. We remember and we're hypercritical of this new administration because we understand that they're there to enact change. They're going to completely U-haul the Labour manifesto that got elected to at 2024. And it just seems unfortunate none of us can actually see the issue, which is our own defence. We're an island nation, we're great at defence, but we're not actually spending money on it.
Well, I think that what our politicians, you'd be forgiven for thinking anyway, seem to think is that that happens organically. If we're just this lovely, tolerant society who says, yeah, you come over here, you do what you want, it doesn't really matter who you are, where you come from, what harm you mean to us and to our women and our girls, as long as we're tolerant of that, they'll realise the error of their ways and they will pose no threat to us at all. And I think that is possibly the most bonkers part of politics in this day and age, is the way that our political class are either so blind to the world around them, or they just bury their heads in the sand in the desperate hope that it remedies itself. Political strategist, young Bob, thank you very much indeed for spending the last hour with us and going through the front pages. Very much appreciated, coming in at this unearthly time of night. I'm perfectly sure that we will see you again very soon here on the home of Common Sense. Right, coming up in the final hour of tonight's show, it's you and it is me and Alex Dyke. 0344 499 1000. Let me know your thoughts on any of the stories we're talking about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Phil Dave with you here on the home of Common Sense. This is Talk. I'm with you until 1 o'clock this morning, taking your calls, your thoughts, your messages on all sorts of different subjects that we have been covering on this evening's show. And my goodness me, you have kept those messages coming in their droves, and I thank you for it. So I'm very sorry if I haven't got to them yet. I promise I'm going to try and read as many as possible in the coming hour. But there is always room for you. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000 if you want to have your say on any of the subjects we are discussing. And how about this for a subject? Because apparently the BBC is quote-unquote screwed unless its licence fee funding model is replaced. That is according to outgoing Today presenter Amal Rajan. Now, he says the corporation's finances are, quote, much worse than people realise. With licence fee revenues in steep decline, the BBC is planning major cuts, including 550 job losses and programme closures, with around 2,000 roles potentially going. To discuss this and to get reaction, who better than not only a friend of this show and a friend of mine, and of course, former BBC broadcaster himself, Alex Dyke. A very good morning.
Good morning, Phil. Nice to be with you.
It's very nice to be with you as well, and thank you for joining us at this unearthly hour. Look, I, Alex, am lucky enough to say that, like you, that when I worked at the BBC, it was a bit more of the heyday of the good days of the BBC, where it really was the envy of the world. And now I look at it and I absolutely don't recognise it. And as much as I will never condone people consuming BBC content and not paying the licence fee, because as we know that is illegal, I almost understand why people are so against paying the licence fee. What the heck has happened?
Well, a few things have happened. A couple I could mention for you, Phil. One is we've fallen out of love with the BBC. And if the BBC want us to give them money for the licence fee, we've got to like them, we've got to respect them, we've got to kind of somehow want to do it, even if we begrudge it a little bit. But I think the rot set in years and years and years ago, or it started to. The writing was on the wall. And I knew I was coming on with you tonight, Phil, so I got thinking about it. So nobody can really pinpoint the absolute pinnacle of the BBC. But for me, it would have been around 1977. So in 1977, you had Match of the Day, The Two Ronnies, Morecambe and Wise, Wimbledon, Top of the Pops, great sitcoms like The Good Life, fabulous drama, and natural history programs, things like that. And
more importantly, 2 television channels.
Exactly. That was my next point, Phil. Only 2 television channels. But in 1977, you get to see a few of these video cassette recorders popping up in stores. And you may remember, if you're old enough, that they used to give them away as prizes on Celebrity Squares with Bob Monkhouse. And he would say, you can actually watch one programme and record the other channel when there were only 2 channels.
Which, of course, Alex, I don't know if you knew Bob Monkhouse or anything about his life, but of course he famously did just that. He actually had several video recorders going in his house, recording output, and in fact, actually so much so that when we sadly lost him, I think it was 2003 Bob Monkhouse died, if my memory serves me right, that it was discovered in his home that he had archives of BBC and other channel programmes that those channels themselves had lost because they didn't cling on to them, but he did. So, I mean, it goes to show that he was a man of his word, at least.
Well, that dovetails nicely into where I was going, Phil. So in 1977, if you were a viewer, you knew there were these video cassette recorders, but there were only about 2,000 in Britain. So you imagine the millions of people in Britain, only 2,000. So most of those would have been owned, and they were very, very expensive. So they were owned by high-income families, particularly people working in television, like Bob Monkhouse, who wanted to record his own material to keep his own archive and other stuff. By 1983, 18% of Britain have video cassette recorders, and we have Channel 4. So things are changing for the BBC. even way back then. And the big thing, Phil, is in those days, right, when people did have more respect and we did live differently and we didn't have to have this and we didn't have to have that and we were prepared to work and put a bit more work into getting what we wanted, we needed the BBC and they needed us. The big change now is the BBC still needs us, but we don't need them because everybody else is doing what what once only the BBC really and a bit of ITV could do.
Well, of course, I mean, basically what we're looking at is a day and age where people are prepared to get their fix, if you like, of either entertainment, education or information, which of course is the mantra of the BBC, is to inform, educate, entertain. That is what's drummed into us when you start working there, at least it certainly used to be. I don't know if it is anymore. You could have fooled me if it is. But now people are choosing to get those different strands of broadcast media from all over the place. And what is worse is they're trying to find it in places that instantly reflect and resemble their stance. So what we've got is we've got a place where people can actually now go in pursuit of material that speaks to them because it's how they think and how they feel, without even checking if it's actually accurate. And one of the things that annoys me about the BBC, and this is where I personally think it went very wrong indeed, was the introduction of the 24-hour news channel. Now, News 24 as it was then has actually proven, I think, to be one of the biggest disasters for the BBC, and I'll tell you why. Is because in the days when we had bulletins throughout the day, we had the breakfast bulletin, the lunchtime bulletin, the evening news and the late news, right? So there's 4 across the day. When people were working when those bulletins weren't on, they were working their socks off, checking, cross-referencing, making sure that everything that was going to be put into those programmes was 100% on the money. As soon as News 24 came along, the demand went sky high. In other words, they had to find content to fill, by the definition of the channel, 24 hours a day. And that is when we started seeing the quality seriously diluted.
Well, you may well be right. That is a good point. And if you remember when BBC News 24 started, ITN had their own news channel with ITV News. And after a couple of years, they bailed because it was just so expensive. The BBC don't really have to worry about budgets. They can just hose things down with cash. I think you make a good point. But getting back to what I was saying just now, Phil, I mentioned 1977 as maybe the pinnacle. It was the highest ratings ever for Morecambe and Wise and Top of the Pops, stuff like that. And we watched and consumed television differently as a family, sat in the living room watching it. And maybe if you were really lucky, you might have a colour portable in the kitchen or the dining room or something like that. But the BBC
a metal
in those
aerial
days,
sticking out of it.
yeah, exactly. You might not have been guaranteed to get a good picture on it, but you might have had one. But in those days, the BBC were brave with drama and comedy and news. And this was not the time for the BBC to go woke and just... I mean, the thing is, it's just like going to see one of your favourite bands do a gig. And not only are they not doing the greatest hits anymore, they're just doing 2 hours of new material. And you're thinking, well, I want the big hitters. The BBC have gone back to the days of Lord Reith in the early 1930s or mid-1930s. We're going to broadcast what we think you should watch, what we think is good for you, not what you want, when all other broadcasters are giving you what you want. And now, Phil, if you're
well, not all other broadcasters, but I agree most of them do.
Yeah. And now, Phil, if you're into making whiskey or belly dancing or doing up old cars or watching someone build their own ark, there will be someone doing what turns you on YouTube. And now everyone's a broadcaster. There are people out there shooting stuff on smartphones, which is just as good as some of the stuff the BBC are doing. And YouTube is the BBC's greatest enemy. I watch talk on YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube. I never, ever watch the BBC or ITV or Sky at all. I get everything from YouTube.
Now, I have to tell you that Andrew from Salisbury has sort of taken my next thought out of my mind, the conversation of where I wanted to go, because I also think a massive part of the BBC being quote-unquote screwed is that the DEI nonsense that they have fallen for. Because you see, I remember, again, when first working there, you were taken on the basis, not you, one was taken on the basis of one's ability and skill and their, if you like, one's degree of journalistic ability. And then what happened is they started panicking because they thought, ooh, we seem to be moving as a society to a more diverse look. And the BBC is not reflecting that. So we're going to completely bypass our own rules here, and we're going to say that it doesn't matter if you have worked for decades to get into a position of higher either authority or recognition, namely in broadcasting, whatever it may be, reporting, maybe anchoring, whatever it is. People used to have to work blooming hard to get to those positions. And then they suddenly thought, this doesn't matter anymore. Quality can go on the backbench because actually what matters is making sure we tick lots of boxes. And that's exactly what Andrew in Salisbury said. The BBC is screwed if it doesn't get rid of DEI. Goodbye, Amal Rajan. He is part of the problem. I could do a better job than him, the tick box king. Now, I have to say I personally don't rate Amal Rajan as a broadcaster either. And I also happen to think that it is curious how the standards have dropped for him being in such a high position there. What the reasons for him being employed were at the BBC, I have no idea, so I'm not going to sit here and speculate. But how do you feel about how the BBC sacrificed quality for the sake of DEI?
I think the BBC, yes, you're right, they did. And I've said on this channel before, the first day I arrived at the BBC, my boss said to me, they've paid their licence fee, entertain them. So I went on and did a radio show where I hopefully entertained a lot of people, and I kept doing that for a long time, nearly 15 years at the BBC. But I tell you what I have noticed, it's not just that, Phil, it's that I could rock up at the BBC and you could have rocked up at the BBC and we would have spoken to our producers and we would have said, right, let's do a phone-in on there are too many old drivers on the road, or there are too many people sponging on benefits, or whatever it was that we wanted to do as a phone-in. We would have a meeting with our production team and we would put that on the air. Those days have long gone. The producers and the presenters can't make those choices anymore. It's all being controlled like Big Brother. And there have been times when I've tuned into the BBC thinking, why aren't you talking about this today? Everybody is talking about, say, illegal immigration. The BBC don't go anywhere near it. It was...
Well, it's much more interesting for them to talk about what's going on in the Middle East.
Well, yes, I guess so. But it was Talk who said, Andy Burnham has been in power now for, I don't know what it was, 2 weeks. He has not mentioned immigration once. You'll never hear stuff like that on the BBC. You will never hear good, honest, unbiased broadcasting on the BBC. And did you ever think we would live in a world where the BBC would not be impartial? And
no, never. Because again, you know, sort of to relate it to my own experience there, and I'm perfectly sure this would have been your experience as well, is that we were basically taught the art of impartiality. Now, I recognise that from what I do here on Talk, you'd be forgiven for thinking that I never knew what it was to be impartial. But actually, I'd like to think it often creeps through. You may have been listening a little earlier on when young Bob was in reviewing the papers, and I went off on a bit of a monologue where I was saying about how all we need to do is come back to the centre to actually respect and understand that everyone is entitled to their opinions and there's always two sides to every story. As long as people have got that basic understanding in life, then suddenly it makes for a much better and kinder world. So I find it unfathomable that something as fundamental to BBC broadcasting as that appears at surface value to have been completely and utterly eroded away. It's horrendous because it really was the only way to help people come together, and now we don't even have that.
I know. It's very sad, and we were talking. I guess the whole point of that story that we're talking about is the BBC is screwed if it doesn't find a new way to fund it. The only way for the BBC is to do, I believe, is to do sponsored programming. This next programme strictly is presented by our friends at Waitrose or Marks and Spencer or whoever. I think that's I don't think people will stomach commercial breaks on the BBC, but why not have sponsored programmes? Now the BBC say we cannot be impartial if we take sponsorship.
Correct.
Well, let's just look at the history of ITV. I would say over the years, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the noughties, ITV were pretty impartial with their news and with their sponsorship. So if there had been a problem, they would not do that on ITN's news at 5:45 or news at 10. I can't remember one time when ITV would have turned their back on a story. And if they could have done it, I'm damn sure the BBC could.
Who knows what the future holds? Alex Dyke, it's always a treat, but it's very late. I'm going to let you get to bed, sir, and I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me on the show this evening. It's always a treat to speak to you, but it's even more of a privilege to speak to you on air. Alex Dyke, former BBC broadcaster there. Speaking to you and speaking to me about the future of the BBC. Who only knows what it has in store? 0344 499 1000 between now and 1 a.m. It's you and it's me. Get those calls in. Let's have a chat on any of the subjects we have been talking about on tonight's show. I would love to hear from you. I'll read out as many of your messages as possible. I'll speak to as many of you as possible. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. A very good morning to you. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this morning here on the home of Common Sense, taking your calls on an array of subjects. We've spoken about so many different things this evening. I don't even know where to start, so I'm going to let Martin in Kent start us off. Martin, a very good morning.
Hello, how are you?
I'm remarkably perky given the time of day. How are you?
I've watched you, I think, twice.
Oh, well, I can only apologise.
No, but talkTV is my go-to.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear it, or indeed Talk.
Alex is probably my favourite.
That's all right. I won't hold that against you because Alex is lovely.
But you seem to have similarities, like professionally.
It's our dress sense. Yeah.
No, like going through the BBC and this, that, and the other. Like, you know. But
how do you feel, Martin? How do you feel about the BBC? Because honestly, I despair. You probably heard me speaking to Alex Dyke there just before the break, and it really does sadden me. If I think of what the BBC was and what it's become, it's completely unbearable what's happened to it, because it really was the broadcast envy of the world. I grew up knowing that is what I wanted to do. That's where I wanted to work. And now I'm almost ashamed to say I work there.
How old do you feel?
I'm 40.
Okay, I'm 64. And
a spring chicken, sir.
Yes, and your person earlier that was on just now mentioned 77.
Yes.
And that was the first time I was actually involved in politics or aware of politics. And it was weird. I mean, I was 15, you know, and I turned up to a political rally in Lewisham or Catford Bridge or whatever, and you can look it up online. And
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, well, anyone can look it up online, not just you. But and it was called Battle of Catford Bridge. And I was 15 years old. I knew nothing about politics whatsoever. But I heard from the background was United the Workers will never be defeated. And that was a Socialist Workers' Party.
Mm.
Basically communists, like, you know, and that is who are ruling us now.
Well, it certainly feels like it, because if you look at the way that those who don't agree with them are moderated and punished, if you look at the way that we're constantly told how evil those of us who maybe think slightly differently are, you can't really help but draw any other conclusion than there's something very dark and sinister going on to what we all used to call free speech.
Well, the weird thing is my parents are Irish, so I'm probably what you would call an immigrant or second generation immigrant.
Yeah.
But I was in a black gang in Brixton. You know, so work that one out. How am I far right? You know?
Oh, look, I mean, but this is the point, Martin, isn't it? Is that there are those who use the term far right because they know it's, to many, an evil expression. And yet we also know that there are plenty of people who don't actually understand what it means anymore because they're using it totally and utterly out of context. If people want to describe me as far right for the views I have, go ahead. Because I know I'm not, it can't offend me. It can't hurt me because I'm not. You know, I mean, how ridiculous. I've said on many an occasion that I'm of Jewish descent. So how on earth can I be far right? That's madness. Far right tried to kill my ancestors.
I'd like to touch on the subject, but I think it might be too volatile.
Oh.
Is the only far right that I can see in Western politics is Islam.
So you see, but you say that that's politics. I mean, obviously, Islam being a religion. And now, look, you say volatile. So here is the thing. I reckon that, obviously, with some of what we have seen, there may be an element of truth to that. But where we go so horribly wrong is the inability to distinguish between peace-loving Muslims and fundamentalists. And what happens is the fundamentalists are hiding behind Islam to say some of the things that they say, to carry out some of the hideous actions they do. And because they say, well, you can't have a go at us for that because we're doing it because we're Muslim, that stops people instantly. It's a blockade. It's a barrier. As soon as someone hears that, they think, oh, better not say anything, actually, because, you know, I've been told that it's wrong to be racist, which is absolutely right, by the way. It is very wrong to be racist. But what it's not wrong is to call out inappropriate behaviour, and certainly behaviour that does not comply with Western values. And this is where it goes very, very murky. And I understand why you say that you might think it might be a volatile discussion. It might be a bit of a dangerous discussion. But I think, hold on, absolutely, hold on, so 2 seconds. I think if we can establish the difference between peace-loving Muslims and fundamentalists, then actually people will be a lot more able to be open about it.
So we are in 2026 AD, correct?
Yep, 2026, yes.
So the Jewish state existed 3,000 years earlier, so we're talking over 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, I believe we're just about to enter the year 5778.
Exactly.
For the Hebrew calendar, if my memory serves. Or is it 577? Yeah, 5778.
635, 637, something like that. And you know, it just doesn't make sense. I'm not religious. I am not religious, but I am morally probably Christian. But you know, and I think that's a nice way to be.
I just think morality comes in all walks of life, Martin. And you know what? The sooner we get to that middle ground that I was speaking about earlier, the sooner that people realise that everyone is entitled to who they want to be, what they want to be, whatever religion they want to follow, all of that, I can't help but think the better the world would be. Martin, 0344 499 1000, thank you so much for your call. Get involved in the conversation. Would love to hear from you. Still loads of time to have your say. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this morning. Let's read out some of your messages now, shall we? This one comes from Terry. Hi, Phil. The left of politics show no respect. They will not even listen to an alternative point of view. That's basically what I was saying, is that I find myself very concerned by the lack of understanding that there are multiple views at play here. This one comes from Gareth. The issue to what you're saying is you have the real ability to say what you want. I, like many others, say what they want and lose their careers and the ability to do right by their families. I was bullied out of the police for having an opinion. Gareth, thank you for reminding me of that, because actually you're right. It's very easy for me to sit here in a job where I'm basically paid to have an opinion. But of course, it means that I can sometimes forget that there are plenty of people who work in jobs where actually opinions are discouraged. And I should remember that because, as I've made it very clear, I used to work at the BBC, and when I did, opinion absolutely was not allowed in those days. In fact, I was even told that I probably really shouldn't even post anything on social media. And now I wouldn't mind, but my on-air career at the BBC was absolutely minimal. I was primarily behind the scenes. I was one of the producers mainly. But even as a producer, I wasn't allowed to post any opinion on social media. How mad is that? How far we've fallen from those days. And so when Gareth says, if you work in a job where an opinion is not permitted, well, then I can understand why maybe people do hold their tongue. But I put it to you like this: if you work with people who don't hold their tongue when they're espousing the views of this bonkers government that we have, well, then maybe opinions are allowed, and that actually it's a case of still being afraid to say what we think just because potentially you go against the vocal minority. This one comes from Glenn, who says, "Hi Phil, for me, the fight rhetoric has always come from the left." I think I read that one out actually earlier, so I won't say that again, but thank you for that, Glenn. Let's have a chat with Tonya, who's in Devon, who's called 0344 499 1000. Tonya, good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for calling. What did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was calling about the assisted dying thing, but can I just quickly pick up on something? Did you just call the Nazi Party far right?
The Nazis?
Yeah, were you referring to Nazis? Because you talked about your Jewish heritage and they said the Nazis.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, of course, Nazism was born out of National Socialism,
yeah,
but they've always been, through history, have been deemed as far right. But of course, you are quite right that Nazi was born out of National Socialism, hence Nazi Party.
But it's ultimately they amount to the same thing, very far left and very far right, is the same thing anyway.
But fear not, Tonya. No, you're quite right to pick that up. I did know that, and I'm sorry if I made it, if I didn't make it clear. But anyway, what would you like to say about assisted dying?
Anyway, what I called for was just to say that earlier on you had, and I can't remember his name, sorry, but it's Rob somebody, I think.
It was young Bob we were speaking to earlier.
Well, he was, and he was talking about assisted dying, and he was coming from the usual, just to keep it as it is nowadays, what we've always had situation, keep the status quo, Christian background thing about because we're supposedly a Christian country and because Christianity...
Well, not supposedly, we are a Christian country.
Yeah. Although most people, let's face it, aren't practicing Christians. But anyway, that we must therefore not allow people to make up their own minds when they're in terrible pain and want to just end their lives. Now, what gets to me is, and what is never spoken about on this subject, and it is always avoided all the time and never gets mentioned, is that we already have the state ending people's lives in the most appalling way legally. What they do, and it was done to my own mother, is they withdraw fluids. So they actually starve people to death. This is the status quo. That is what's legal now. And they keep saying, we can't allow euthanasia. Well, they're already doing it, and they're doing it in the worst possible way, instead of doing what we do with our pets, which, rightly so, we're not allowed. I mean, I wouldn't dream of letting a dog suffer and suffer and suffer. You put them down because it's the kind thing to do. But with human beings, we have to let them suffer forever. And why? Because of these, I really want to say stupid idiots, but Christian. I'm not knocking religion at all. But the idea that we must all suffer because this ancient Christian idea that human life is sacred, it's different from animal life. It's not. We're animals. We are animals, okay? And
Tonya, I'm sure you heard my discussion earlier on with Bob, if you referred to it, and you'll know that I said exactly the same thing. I can't understand how, if we are decent enough to say that we don't want our animals to suffer, why on earth are we prepared to let our fellow humans suffer? Doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
and where I think where I think a lot of the lines are blurred is that people have got this ridiculous idea that somehow we will be putting our lives in the hands of politicians who will turn around and they will decide when we live or die. That is not what assisted dying is about.
The state, in charge of anything. Like, you can't trust them with anything. It's about letting people make the decision. The state are already doing it, and they're doing it in the worst possible way because they're withdrawing fluids and making people die slowly. That is murder. I'm sorry, what they're doing now is murder, and that's legal. So if you're going to murder people, well, let's at least put it back in their hands and let them decide how they want to end their lives, and to do it in a humane way, you know, like it's done in Switzerland or whatever, in a humane... Look, I know they're always going to come back to their same argument. Oh, it's a slippery rope. They'll start killing off everybody, all the disabled people. But no, the whole point is that you put it in the hands of the individual themselves. Yeah, of
Absolutely.
course, there's always going to be cases of people with family pressure, etc. But we've already got what's worse. We've got the state effectively starving people to death. How is that okay? It's appalling. I've watched it happen. I've had to stand there and watch it happen. It is not funny. It's disgusting.
No, I don't think anyone would describe it as funny. But look, Tonya, look, obviously I can hear that this is a subject you're very passionate about.
And I thought it was funny because he thought his big toe was akin to stubbing his toe was akin to someone terminally ill.
Well, no, I did make a point. Tonya, I did make a point to young Bob when he used that comparison. I said I think it is quite a flippant comment to make, and that I think that those who do
ignorant comments, he's obviously never. And you know, why do people like him think that they want to tell everybody else how they should die? Why can't he just get on with his own death and deal with his own death?
Well, I'd rather he got on with his own life at the age of 18. But anyway, look, I mean, I would...
his own bloody death, because I honestly hope that he really suffers at the end of life.
No. Tonya, now, come on. No, I don't... you sound like a decent person. Let's not wish that on anyone, and I certainly don't wish that on anyone.
On everybody.
I don't think he is wishing it on it. Tonya, I don't think he is wishing that on anyone. I think his point... This is a discussion, not a rant. I think his point was that he was saying is that he didn't like the idea, because of his Christian teachings, putting the decision of life and death in the hands of other humans. I think that was all the point he was trying to make. But look, Tonya, I promise you, I am by and large with you. I think that assisted dying is simply a way of saying that people should be in charge of their own destiny. I think that individuals should have the right to choose whether or not they want to carry on with their life or not. I don't personally think there is anything wrong with that. Obviously, I hope, beyond hope, that most people would choose life over death, but then that's easy for me to say because I'm not one of the many people in this country who live with life-limiting conditions and suffer on a daily basis. This text message comes from Harmony. It says, "Dearest Phil," very kind start, thank you. It says, "Thank you for what you're saying about assisted dying. Unless you have a chronic illness, severe mental health or physical ailments, or even disabled, you will never ever know how much pain it takes for someone to be pushed to suicide." This is coming from somebody who has tried many, many times. It's definitely not as easy as stubbing a toe and being like, oh, I'm going to end my life. It's nothing like that at all. You're doing amazing. All the best. Well, Harmony, I'm truly not just saying this. That level of candid messaging is the reason why I love this job. So thank you so much for your message and for being so open and honest about it. I'm very pleased, without sounding too Pollyanna-ish about it, I'm very pleased that you are still here to send that message. And I'm sorry that you have been put through whatever you've been put through to push you to that kind of limit. But your message is very much appreciated. If you want to join in the discussion that we're having this evening, or indeed this morning now, you're very welcome to do so. 87222. Start your message with the word talk. This one comes from Kim. I hope you get to read this out. From someone who has suffered from a long-term illness. When you know you are going to die in extreme pain, the fear must be so intense that you will lose all control over your body, that you can't stop that before it happens. Please ask Bob, obviously Bob's gone now, if he would be happy to lie in bed when the current law states that doctors can just turn up the morphine whilst waiting for the patient to die in a drug-painful stupor. Wouldn't he rather be able to have the choice to end his life legally before that happens? What would he choose if he's in that position? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hurtling towards the final moments of this evening's show. It's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this morning here on Late Nights on Talk, the home of common sense. And in just a moment's time, we'll be finding out what Ben Fletcher has in store for you throughout the night as he'll take over the airwaves from 1 o'clock across Talk and Talk Sports. But before that, we've got a treat for you now. Good gracious me. Hold on to your hats. Because, Grace, good evening.
That must be the most disappointing thing that people have heard on the radio ever.
Absolutely not. The disappointing thing is you didn't say good evening back. And also on the line, Ken. Good evening, Ken.
Good morning.
Good morning, whatever. Don't show me up. This is my show. All right, Ken and Grace, Grace and Ken. First of all, Grace, let's start off with your good self. What would you like to tell us?
Well, I had called in about flags, but actually following the previous conversation and comments from Tonya, I kind of feel compelled to respond to that if I'm allowed to.
Of course. This is the home of free speech. You're allowed to say whatever you feel.
And the reality is that there isn't a good solution to the problem of death and suffering, aside from perhaps that I think genuinely, and this will sound stupid and Pollyanna-ish, I think Jesus provides the best solution that there is. But there is going to be suffering and pain in this lifetime, and I'm not trying in any way to diminish the horror of that. I know that what some people go through at the end of their lives is indescribably awful. So I'm so sorry that if anything I say sounds trite or to dismiss that, because I'm not wishing to. But I would like to make clear that the concerns about assisted dying are not just Christians saying, well, we demand that people do not have assisted death because we believe this about God. I worked with an organisation of doctors who are Christians, and their primary concern was about vulnerable people. So as Christians, we do believe that God has made human life sacred, and I think there's actually a lot of good reasoning to conclude that to be the case, both from science and philosophy. But it's not just that we want to say to other people, we believe this, therefore you can't do that. Christianity really is about personally deciding to follow Jesus, not telling other people what to do. But because assisted dying would really affect...
I was going to say,
people,
it's not so much a case of telling people what to do, it's about guiding people to what, in Christianity's vision, if you like, is the decent thing to do.
But I don't think it actually really is. Like I say, I worked with doctors who are Christians, but their concern, having seen lots of people who were near the end of their lives, their concern was that they knew that, or they know that, if assisted dying becomes an option, there will be a lot of vulnerable people who feel under pressure to end their lives. And
right, well, hold that thought 2 seconds then, Grace. Let's see what Ken has to say about that. Ken, how do you feel about this subject?
Well, I never called up about this subject.
I know. I'm sorry. I have sprung this on you. I'm sorry, but
no problem. This is a very, very, very serious subject, and I agree with the things that Grace has said so far. She seems to be a sound Christian lady, but I believe that the Bible says, God tells us in the Bible, we've all got a birthday and we've all got a death day. It is appointed unto men to die once, but after this, the judgment. As Christians, we love our neighbour as ourselves. We don't judge anybody. And the reasons Christians speak up against this assisted suicide, assisted murder, is because we know there is a place called heaven and a place called hell. And God is willing that none should perish and go to hell, but all should come to repentance. So the reason we speak up is not to judge people, because we're concerned about the eternal destiny of the person. And if they think life is tough here, wait till they get to hell. Luke 16, Jesus tells us clearly it is a place of eternal torment, no escape. So that is why we speak up, because we love people and we warn them in love and concern for their soul. Listen, friend, don't kill yourself.
But you see, but
believe
Ken,
in Jesus.
Ken, sorry, hang on. On that very thought, though, can't it be possible that people want to see those who are suffering end their lives a little sooner out of love?
Listen, when you commit suicide, self-murder, it's like literally jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. There is a hell. Everybody who's listening to this, please listen. God loves everyone who's listening to us right now. I'm talking about the God of the Bible, the true God. His son Jesus came here to die for us, that we don't go to hell. He gave his life, he shed his blood, he was buried, he rose from the dead. The Messiah of Israel is coming back soon. Judgment Day is coming to the whole world. So we're speaking up here because we love people. We're not judging. I am a sinner saved by God's grace, but I believe in Jesus, and he has given me everlasting life. This is the good news for those who are dying. They can change their mind about Jesus, ask God for forgiveness, put their faith in Jesus, and get to heaven after the stuff is done.
Do you know what, though, Ken? The problem is, and Grace, I don't know how you feel about this, I think this is very easy for the three of us to say about people that we want them to live life and to choose life and to see the light, for want of a better term, whatever expression you wish to use. I just think it's easy for us to say it because we're not necessarily the ones going through what those who are suffering are going through.
Phil.
Hang on, Ken, let Grace answer.
I want to make a point quickly that I'm afraid I think Ken's going to hate me for, but I have to say it.
Oh.
The point of hell being eternal torture came up, and there is, I'm not going to argue with Ken about it, but there is reason to conclude that actually the Bible says that in hell things are destroyed, so human beings are punished, but then they cease to exist. I personally don't believe that God causes people to continue eternally existing, always and always, forever and ever and ever, so that he can torture them. I think that that's a misunderstanding of the Bible, but I really don't want to argue with Ken about that. I'm just an annihilationist myself. But I think that you're making a very good point, Phil, that it's really difficult for us, without being in the situation of terminal cancer or whatever else, to really relate to that. I think the only thing that I can really relate to is, having had various situations of mental ill health, is feeling compelled to do something that I don't actually want to do. Having had an eating disorder, I've often felt, I must starve myself, or I must make myself ill, I must exercise obsessively, and I don't actually want to. And so my big worry is that if assisted dying becomes an option, some people might feel compelled to end their lives when they don't actually want to. They might feel that they're a burden. They might feel that, you know, their loved ones would get more inheritance if they ended their lives. And I know that it's possible to think you have to do something and not actually want to do it. So I'm really worried about the pressure that assisted dying could place on people who are disabled or perhaps elderly, and that they would feel compelled to do something when they don't actually want to do it. And that's what really worries me. But I'm not in any way trying to derogate from the awful suffering that people go through at the end of their lives. But when I do hear this topic come up, often it actually boils down more to dignity. Often people end up saying, well, we don't want to be undignified at the end of our lives, more often than pain. And actually, to need help from other people, even to go to the toilet, shouldn't be something that is considered worthy of dying. I think that that's a bit of an insult, perhaps even to disabled people, to say that if you've got a lack of dignity, your life should end. So I kind of worry about that messaging too. And I think we should hear more often in this debate from disabled people, because they don't often have enough of a voice.
Well, I think it's less about whether or not someone is disabled, differently able, whatever it is. It's basically more about the level of pain and suffering, we've used that word a lot, that someone has to go through in their everyday life before we can truly appreciate just how unbearable it must be for someone to want to end it all. Look, you know what, I think that I understand the reason why I wanted both of you on, and again, I'm sorry, because I know that's not necessarily what either of you phoned to speak about this evening, but I know that both of you have called the station enough to know how flexible you are. But I guess I wanted to get your perspective because I know that religious teachings are a major factor for individuals in the assisted dying debate. And although I am a person of religion, I'm not going to pretend that my religiosity has necessarily got in the way of any decision I've ever thought about assisted dying. Speaking of flexibility, ducking the camera like you wouldn't believe just now. What a treat that was for me to see the dexterity that Ben Fletcher has to offer. I can only begin to use that as some sort of imagination for what's coming up between 1 o'clock and the remainder of the overnights. He's joining me in the studio. Ben Fletcher, a very good evening, good morning.
Good evening. I did wonder how you're going to navigate from the very serious subject of assisted dying to me appearing in the studio.
I'm not going to lie, I was panicked about that as well, to be honest with you, so I just really couldn't think of any other way, and I just thought, oh, go for it.
Great segue, great segue. Yeah, it's, I'm very good, thank you. I went to, have you ever been to, I've forgotten what it's called now, the Chatham Military Dock?
I can't say that I have. Pray do tell.
It's the very, very end of the school holidays now. So my 10-year-old son and my 7-year-old son is basically just trying to find any mechanism whatsoever to keep them interested.
Is this a case of now just clutching? I was thinking, like, just do anything, please. Just go back to school.
Yeah, just throwing money at it. It was a really good day out. Really good day out. I didn't even know the place existed. Huge history. I bet you didn't know that's where the HMS Victory was made.
I did not, but I do now. But every day is a school day.
It is, and how we could do with that right now for a number of reasons.
Fletch, what have you got coming up on overnight?
We are building up to another big weekend of Premier League action already underway. Erling Haaland, massive haircut. You remember him as the blonde-locked Norwegian. He's had a haircut now, so he looks completely different. Yeah, the long blonde locks have gone. Yeah, exactly. Scored 2 goals against Palace. So those of us who picked him as their fantasy football captain, double points, very, very happy. We're looking ahead to.
Did you pick him?
I did.
Oh, no wonder. That's why he's talking about him. There's nothing to do with making the
nothing whatsoever to do with the result. But yeah, big weekend of Premier League, big weekend of football. We've got all the usual fun and games. We do a Guess the Intro quiz. I know you like your music, Phil, so that'll be one for you at about 2:15.
Absolutely.
We play you 1 second of a song. In the 1 second one day, you have to guess the name of the song. And after a penalty shootout, you versus one other listener, the winner will take home
Am I allowed to enter it, though, if I've just done 3 hours?
Yeah, of course you can. Just put on a bit of a voice and... don't say that you're Phil from London.
OK.
It's Dave.
I'll be Dave from Hertfordshire. That's
Dave from Hertfordshire.
There you go,
can you put on the builder's voice or a different trade?
Do you know what, honestly, if I even attempt it, it would be beyond embarrassing. Actually, very quickly, because
go on.
I've got to get to Heather before the end of this programme as well. I know you've got to run off and prepare. But a school I went to in Acton, I just remember one time that there was a pupil who came up during break time. I'm sure this comes as a massive shock. I used to hang around the teachers an awful lot more than I did my fellow classmates. And it was in the craze of yo-yos. Do you remember when yo-yos were all the rage in the playground?
Cat in the Cradle and all that.
Absolutely. And this chap, he came up to the teacher and he said something along the lines of, "Miss, I never gave her a go on me yo-yo and now she got the ump with me." I genuinely had to ask the teacher to translate that for me.
Really? I
hadn't got a clue what he just said. She did explain anyway. Fletch, it's going to be a fantastic programme as ever. Thank you so much.
Just to warn you, by the way, I am going to walk behind you. I'm not doing that again.
No, don't duck. It's fine. Do you know what? We're all friends here. It's fine. So if you see Ben walking behind, it's all good. He's taking his microphone off now and everything. We'll catch you on Talk and Talk Sport. So after 1 o'clock. Heather is in Gavan to end the show. Heather, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Phil. Talking about the evolution of TV, what BBC got to realise, we're in the 21st century of TV. It's everything has gone subscription, and I'm a bit, and I love watching TV by paying on a description base, because you get better value for your money. And plus, one thing about subscription is...
Well, it's Heather, you're more in charge, aren't you? You're more in control of your television destiny.
Of your own TV.
Yeah.
And that's one thing about BBC. If they want to succeed in the 21st century, they need to abolish the TV licence fee and get in with the game with subscription model, because it is a big competition. It's like when you're talking to Ben Fletcher from Talk Sport, you can get sports on Talk Sport, and you can get
that's normally what Talk Sport is, yes.
And all the other platforms. You can get TV from